right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part two of the Aaron Dean trial sentencing for reckless manslaughter. I had expected this to be a short show today for sentencing, but it's turned into a long one. This is an unusual jury sentencing, folks. Okay, and Sean hopped right in. Hey, Sean.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing? Welcome back. I'm glad you can make it.
Yeah.
I hope the break was helpful.
Oh, yeah, it was nice to get a lot of work done. So.
And yeah, my smallest one is homesick today, so I got to check in on the family, grab a little bit of soup. So it worked for me. We should be starting up in court shortly. Let me get that spooled up. I sent out invites to the usual suspects. Let's see. Where is that screen? Watch live. Right here. Okay, it'll be this when it comes back live. So that's all set. Look at the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, folks, please subscribe and hit the like, thumbs up button. That would be greatly appreciated. If you'd like to submit, camera's live in court. If you'd like to submit questions or comments for us to address specifically, you ought to put those in a super chat form on YouTube. $5 minimum, folks. $5 minimum on YouTube super chats, or even smarter, perhaps much smarter, unquestionably much smarter. Just become a Law of Self-Defense member, and you can ask all the questions you want on the member dashboard, where this is also being streamed, for less than $10 for an entire month. As many questions as you want to pose. Now, if you are a member, become a member. You can do that right now at lawofselfdefense.com/join. It's only about 30 cents a day, folks. You can submit all the questions you want. I do ask that in caps, you put the word question at the beginning. Otherwise, it's hard for me to separate it from the chatter going on among the members in the chat room. So super chat on YouTube, $5 minimum, or for less than $10 a month, all the questions you want on the member dashboard chat, where we're also streaming this video. Become a member right now at lawofselfdefense.com/join. Sean, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
All right, sounds great. You guys can find me at Potentially Criminal. It's on YouTube, potentiallycriminal.locals.com. I'm Potentially Criminal on Rumble. On Twitter, well, there have been some issues, so you can find me at LawTube Sean until Elon fixes that mess. But yeah, I try to cover topics criminal law related that go on. I do a weekly show every Thursday night. If there's trials or things like that going on, I do try to cover them. Past couple of weeks been a little busy, but now going forward, should have a little more time going forward on that. You can also find me at BitChute. Pretty much anywhere you think you could find me, I will be out there running around. So.
Okay, cool. All right, we're back in session. I hear noise, audio. Kurt's been sent an invite. All the usual suspects have been sent an invite, folks, but everybody's busy, so I can't guarantee any particular person's presence is as their interest and their schedule permits. So it's been an interesting morning. I thought this would be a short day sentencing, but it's an unusual case of jury sentencing instead of judge sentencing. The jury handling the punishment phase. I guess defendants in Texas have that option. There's only a few states that do this. And because the jury has to make the call now on sentencing, they'll be constrained by the statutory sentence for manslaughter, which is 2 to 20 years. But it's like a mini trial again. The state is presenting witnesses and making arguments, and the defense is doing the same. I presume they'll each have kind of a closing argument to the jury recommending the sentence that they would prefer, each side. And then the jury will presumably go into some kind of deliberations, and there'll be another pause in the action until they come back with what they think the sentence should be. This morning, we saw a psychiatrist who had done the pre-hire screening of Aaron Dean for the Fort Worth Police Department. He didn't like Aaron Dean. He recommended against the hiring of Aaron Dean. But a panel of 3 other psychologists also looked at Aaron Dean and said he was good to go. So that's how Aaron Dean got hired. They brought forth a girl from college 18 years ago who'd complained that Aaron Dean had touched her inappropriately in a library. He pled nolo contendere to a misdemeanor assault, just paid a fine. There's no official record of this because it was 18 years ago and they just don't bother keeping the records that long. But this girl had saved her 5-page complaint about this. She still has it to this day. She provided it in triplicate to the court for the hearing this morning. So she obviously doesn't like Aaron Dean. On cross-examination.
Ready for the jury.
Okay, jury's going to be coming in.
Okay, let's go.
Who else? They had the defense called the woman who runs the probation department, having her talk about, hey, this is an option too. Obviously, they'll encourage the jury to consider that. And the state basically, on cross-examination of this poor woman, basically undercut the entire probation system of the state of Texas, saying it's all basically pointless.
And then they had his
might reoffend. Yeah.
And they had his church buddy testify as well.
Also, the older brother of the victim testified as well as a family member, kind of spark of life testimony.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll be right back. I got to take care of something.
Sure. Yeah, that chick from college was man. She never forgot. she's going to carry that 5-page complaint into her casket with her.
Everyone may be seated. Good afternoon. We are ready to proceed. Mr. Gill.
We call Gail Armstrong.
Gail Armstrong. Gail Armstrong. She's outside.
Before
Come on, please, man.
Before the lunch break, I had put a poll up on YouTube. Max 20 years, a sentencing prediction. Max 20 years, 10% of people chose that. More than 10 years, 16% of people chose that. Equal or lesser than 10 years, 37%. And minimum sentence, 2 years or probation, 37% chose that.
There's a rule of procedure.
All right, Gail Armstrong.
You cannot be in court unless you're testifying, and once you have testified, do not discuss your testimony with anybody else except the lawyers, okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Anna. Can you tell the jury your name, please?
My name is Gail Armstrong.
Ms. Armstrong, how are you occupied or employed?
I am semi-retired, which never happens, but I have worked with my husband in self-employment, homeschooled 4 children, and have stayed very busy.
You help your husband with his business?
Yes.
And what kind of business are you all in?
He tunes and repairs pianos. We are also in full-time ministry, and he also sings concerts at retirement homes and places like that.
Have you lived a long time in the Tarrant County area?
I was born here, raised here, and am still here.
Lifelong resident?
Correct.
All right. So do you know the individual seated 2 seats to my right over here?
I do.
Who is he?
That is Aaron Dean.
How do you know Aaron?
I met Aaron when he was 12 years old. Their family began to attend the church that we were in. We also home educated as well as his family, and we had started a choir, Metroplex wide, for those kiddos. And so Aaron became a member of that when he was 13, which would have been.
Hit that like thumbs up on YouTube, folks. You're falling behind. 200 likes, 1,000 people. That's not enough. We need 50% likes minimum.
I do.
And you met them through the homeschool network?
Yes.
And has there been a period of time when y'all have gone to church together?
Yes, we actually helped start a church with his family and then continued on for another 12 or so years in the same church.
And where was that church located?
We started a church in Mansfield Family Church, and then from there we attended Fair Park Baptist Church in Crowley. And my husband was minister of music and youth at the last church I mentioned.
And was Aaron a member at that church also?
Yes.
Okay, so was he, did he have anything to do with the youth ministry that your husband ran?
Well, yes, he was a member of the choir. Now, the homeschool choir met weekly, but we did concerts on Sundays, so a couple of times a week with that. Over the course of the 19 years that we had that choir, Aaron was probably there most of that time until he graduated from college, because we went from high school choir to college and career, all the way down to younger ones. So,
So there was the homeschool choir, that's one group,
correct.
and then the church choir is actually a different group.
Well, the church itself, yes, Through different ministries, there was things that at church that were separate from that choir. The choir we had took tours on a yearly basis all over the country. And so we heavily depended on young men like Aaron to load the suitcases and open the doors.
So what kind of things would Aaron do to help with that choir ministry?
He was quite knowledgeable with the sound equipment. And then, like I said, there was always setup, chairs and things to move at the church that would not normally be there, or the places that we would rehearse.
She's someone who knows the
And like I
defendant
said,
from
when we would
church.
go anywhere, we had to carry equipment. Aaron was always there to help set up and load
Character witness for the defendant.
whatever we needed.
So what kind of a guy did you come to know Aaron to be?
Aaron's he's a great guy. He led by example. Of course, he's been raised to be that way. But I just have a couple of circumstances I really remember when we were, say, loading up buses, and as young men have a tendency to do, they would become distracted, and he would kind of lead the crew. But he was never demonstrative about that. He's like, hey, we got more to do, but he would do that while he was doing it, you know. He definitely led by leadership and just coaching, you know, the younger guys as he got older. He always did what we asked him to do, and if we needed something done, he would ask if he could help with that. He's very skilled musically, and so there were times when my husband couldn't do a rehearsal. Aaron would step in. He'd ask what he could do and what he should do, and did exactly what my husband's name is Craig. So exactly what Craig asked him to do. And you know what? I was talking to somebody the other day. And I said,
Action, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Suspended.
Do you have another example that you'd like to share with the group?
yes, as we were had the church, the young people would go and play outside quite a bit, and it was rollerblading time. And one thing I always admired about Aaron was that, now we have 4 daughters. 3 are biological and 1 is a mixed race that we adopted. So he was always the gentleman that even though there was a goal line for the race, if someone fell, he would stop and pick them up. So Aaron was always had other people in consideration for what he was doing.
Not a relation to the defendant.
You told me about a time when you all needed some fence repair, and Aaron assisted with that.
Yes, just recently, we made a move to relocate from my East Fort Worth home where I actually grew up in. And my husband's health issues didn't allow him to set T-posts. I was like, oh, I was going to do it and I needed help. So I tagged Aaron. And I thought, can you help me put this fence up? Of course, he actually put the fence up and I kind of helped him, which I will never do again. Fencing is not my deal now. But Aaron worked relentlessly to do that for us, and he had other things he had to stop work for, and he would go do that, and he would be there either early in the morning or stay late at night to get the job done. And straight. He's pretty accurate.
So he finishes the jobs he starts?
Yes, I mean, whether that was my fence or whether it was working in the music programs that we had, there was never a time that we couldn't count on Aaron finishing or doing what he said he would do. Never.
So you said earlier that he's respectful of other people?
Always. We've worked with probably, between our church work and the choir, well over 1,000 young people. And I never observed a roll of the eyes from Aaron. He's always been respectful and even to other people, courteous. He's the door opener.
Not this time.
A rule follower?
Yes, very
This
much
time he
so.
went through the window.
That comes with partly with completing his jobs too, but I don't recall ever him challenging me, which I know that, I mean, most of y'all would know when a husband's doing a job, there's a wife somewhere. And I dealt a lot with these young people and never had an opportunity to ask him to complete something that he had started. And when we take young people on choir tours from Washington DC to New York, and we have teenagers, one time 150, you get a lot of opportunities for young people to challenge the rules. But Aaron was always on top of what he needed to be doing.
Don't call him a straight shooter.
Did the 150 teenagers include both boys and girls?
Yes, and amazingly so, it's not like we had a real low amount of boys. We had a pretty equal amount of boys and girls, young women, 13 to 18 on most of our tours.
Is Aaron a domineering type personality?
No, not at all. He's very approachable, very courteous in anything that we ask or needed him to do. Not pushy at all.
Is he egotistical?
I wouldn't describe him as egotistical. I would say Aaron has strived to be accurate and know what he needed to do. Confident when we gave him a job, but not egotistical.
Did he give you the impression he felt he was superior to other people?
No, I wouldn't say so. He has leadership skills, and other people look to him to find out what it was they might need to do. But as far as, no, he's a very approachable, humble young man.
We pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
You have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
State's gonna go hard at the church lady.
Oh, that might not look good.
So, ma'am, you knew the defendant from church.
Yes, sir,
You go to church a lot.
all the time.
You're a very religious person.
I would say I am a person of faith, but I am not totally religious.
It's Christianity,
Yes,
religion, Jesus,
absolutely.
and the Sermon on the Mount. Didn't Jesus urge his followers, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth?
What?
There's someone
What?
out?
Objection. Object to this.
I'm not certain on the
Object to
Sermon
the
on the
shit.
Mount.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not.
I think Pharisees might have asked that,
Completely
Pharisees asked
objectionable.
that.
maybe.
Yeah.
Do you believe an eye for an eye?
I believe in beating
I
tax
think-
collectors.
personal perspective and understanding is that we serve a God of love and mercy and forgiveness. And we are expected to be Christ-like. So I don't know that eye for an eye always applies.
Is it Christ-like to touch a woman who does not want to be touched?
Objection.
No,
Object.
Is it Christ-like to take the life of another person?
I think the
Object.
Bible defers several things. There is unjustly, and then there's a time that, as in the scripture, it talks about there's a time to kill, a time to, there are situations that God allows us to exert discernment in.
You don't agree with this jury's verdict, do you?
I don't know that I don't agree. I know that a tragic thing happened and a young woman lost her life.
Do you think the defendant should be held accountable for that woman losing her life?
I need to,
He's being held accountable.
we are in a court of law, and laws give us guidance, and I think that there are certain ways that he should be held accountable.
Why is her personal opinion relevant on any of this to sentencing? She's a character witness.
Do you want me to continue? I can't
Sure,
tell.
yes, please.
Okay. So, given the law, as Christians, since you deferred to that, we are to submit to the authorities of the law, and there are things that we must go by.
And so if this jury found him guilty, then this jury should punish him, isn't that correct?
I think the jury has a responsibility now to make a decision accordingly.
But it's their decision to punish him, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Read the record.
Nothing further, Judge.
Then Ms. Armstrong be excused subject to any potential recall.
No objection from the state.
Thank you, ma'am.
Give on to Caesar.
Mr.
Exactly.
Tom Dugan.
Tom Dugan.
These are all character witnesses to try to rehabilitate the jurors' view of the defendant following, of course, the conviction and also the state's case in chief on sentencing here, where they did everything they could to make him look like a narcissistic monster, a prospective rapist. Yeah, folks, the best way to know that we're doing a live stream is to be on our email list. Probably the most efficient way to get on our email list is to get a free copy of our best-selling book, The Law of Self-Defense. Free. We only ask that you cover the cost of shipping the book to you. Get this at lawofselfdefense.com/free book.
Come on, please, sir. Raise your right hand for me. Solemnly swear or affirm testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, Your Honor.
Have a seat. Rule of procedures in effect says you cannot be in court unless you're testifying. Once you have testified, don't discuss your testimony with anybody else except the lawyers. Okay?
Yes, sir.
You have a spelling. First and last name and spell it for the court reporter, please.
First name Thomas, Thomas. Last name is Dugan, Dugan.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Dugan, how are you occupied or employed?
Employed by the Fort Worth Police Department. I'm a detective in the West Side General Assignment.
So you're a Fort Worth Police Department officer. You're assigned to the West Side area. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I'm a detective.
And then detective, you said you are assigned to what's called general assignments.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean?
Basically, we have certain departments for homicide, robbery, things like that. We get anything from, somebody's car is burglarized, retail theft at Target, criminal mischief, basically everything else.
So you investigate a wide range of criminal offenses.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been a detective?
Since I got promoted in March of 2019.
And before that, how were you assigned?
I was a patrol officer. My whole career, I did all of my time on the east side of Fort Worth on midnights.
How long were you a patrol officer?
Approximately 8 years.
So during those 8 years, would it be a fair statement that you were a commissioned law enforcement officer serving citizens of Fort Worth?
Yes, sir.
Were you ever assigned as a field training officer?
Yes, sir.
What does a field training officer do?
We train officers once they graduate the academy.
So once an officer graduates an academy, they go through an additional series of trainings. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And is there more than one phase to field training?
Yes, sir. I don't know exactly how they do it now. It's constantly changing and trying to improve. But when I was doing it, there were 3 phases. The first phase, second phase, third phase. Each phase is 4 weeks. Once they finish third phase, then they do what they call ghost phase, which I believe they still do. And that was a 2-week phase where their field training officer would be in civilian clothes and kind of just be with them and let the trainee handle the calls, best they could, and kind of evaluate from there.
So what were your duties as a field training officer? What were you trying to accomplish?
Depending on the phase that they were in, just try to help them along, make sure that they were up to standard with, how far along they were. For example, if I had a first phase rookie right out of the academy, I would hope that they could find the place that they were going to, call them, they were dispatched to without killing us, and be able to talk to the people, take notes, get good information. It's basic stuff. Write a good report, communicate well with people, things like that. First phase is pretty basic. Second phase, which is, I believe, is what I had with Aaron. I honestly don't recall. Second phase is a little bit more. You're expected to investigate a little bit further. You're learning in phase 1. Hey, what did I miss on this call? Well, you missed this. You should have asked this. Things like that. In second phase, they should be a little bit more in tune with what's going on, what they're doing, and third phase and so on.
So you generally expect an officer to improve as they go through the various phases, right?
Yes, sir.
In their learning process to become a full-time Fort Worth police officer.
Yes, sir.
Now, do you know the gentleman over here 2 seats to my right?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
It's Aaron Dean.
Did you know Aaron Dean to be a Fort Worth police officer?
Yes.
In fact, were you Aaron Dean's field training officer at one point?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember approximately when that was?
I believe it was in 2018 sometime. I'm not sure. I believe it was 2018.
Would it be a fair statement that as a field training officer, you have supervised and trained a number of different Fort Worth police officers?
Yes, sir.
Some better than others.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what phase of field training you were assigned to Aaron?
As I said, I wouldn't stake my life on it. I believe it was second phase. I don't believe it was first phase, and I recall him being in another phase after I had him, I think on day shift, but like I said, I believe it was second phase.
So would this have occurred on the east side, East Division of Fort Worth?
Our training, yes, sir.
And approximately how long a period of time does these phases of field training last?
4 weeks.
So approximately a month?
Yes, sir.
Would you be with the officer that's being trained for the entire shift?
Yes, sir. Yeah, give or take, a few minutes here and there like at the sector or something like that. But yeah, generally the whole shift we're together. Like on calls out, yes.
How did you find Aaron to be as a field trainee?
You know, for the phase that I had him, specifically, like I can't recall any specific call that we were on. You know, as you mentioned, I had countless rookies that I trained. So, but nothing ever stood out to me that there was any issue. If there were issues, they were documented. I do specifically recall him being willing to learn and wanting to learn. Sometimes you have, you know, kids coming out of the academy that are 20-nothing years old and they think they know everything. Aaron was very humble. He wasn't that way. Doing what we do, we generally have to have thick skin, so we kind of give each other a hard time a lot in the department, but especially with rookies. And he took all the, you know, the joking around very well in stride and didn't get his feelings hurt. He was very humble and a good sport throughout all of that. So I do recall that.
Would it be a fair statement that you don't remember exactly all these calls that you went on with him, but certainly there were some you certainly had to counsel him and correct him on some of his methods, is that right?
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. I don't recall specifically, but with what we do, you can't know everything. You can graduate the academy. I remember when I graduated the academy and my first shift out after field training, honestly, I thought I have a gun and a car, like a police car. People are going to call me to their house, expect me to know what to do. Like, it's very overwhelming. So there's no way you're going to learn everything and know everything. So there's going to be correction, first phase, second phase, third phase, fourth phase, and you're going to continue to learn throughout your entire career. So yeah, there were probably things that I corrected him on, but I don't recall what they were. And I do remember that everything that I did speak with him about, that he was receptive.
Did he seem to take in what you told him?
Yes, sir.
And did he seem to learn from the direction you gave him and adjust his methods accordingly?
Yes. Yeah, he wanted to learn. He's a smart guy. And so he's very analytical. You know, everything I told him, I do remember him being like, you know, he was just trying to learn and, you know, apply everything. So.
And that's the whole purpose of field training, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
To take the academy graduate and continue to prepare them to be a functional Fort Worth police officer.
Yes, sir.
And he was receptive to the direction that you gave him, is that right?
Yes.
Did he ask questions?
Yes.
Did they seem to be appropriate questions?
I don't recall. I mean, I know he asked questions because all rookies ask questions. But as I said, I perceived him to be very, you know, into the nuts and bolts of things, so to speak. He would want to know why we do this, or not just, okay, this is the way we do it, or why we do it this way, kind of thing.
Did you, from dealing with him, did you come to learn that he had previously worked as an engineer?
I did know that.
Did that seem to fit the way he approached the job?
Yes.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago that part of the job is training the officers to interact with the public.
Yes, sir.
Is interaction with the public a big part of being a police officer?
Yes, sir. Probably the biggest. And it's what we do.
And how did Aaron do with his interactions with the public?
He did well. You know, if there's anything that he could have been better at, it was that. Not that he did a bad job. Most people, whether it's policing, whatever it is that you're doing in life, they want to know that you are listening to them, that you care about them. And so everyone's built different. You know, not everybody's a people person. I didn't perceive Aaron to be a people person. You know, maybe I perceived him to be a little nervous. I didn't know what it was, but I know that that was probably one of the areas that he struggled with is, you know, interacting with people. It was just the way, I believe it was just the way he's made.
The engineer there?
Yes.
Was he compassionate towards the needs of others?
Absolutely.
And at the end of the 30-day phase, are you called upon as a field training officer to either pass the person on to the next phase or make other recommendations?
Yes, sir. Throughout the process, there's, I want to say there were weekly meetings with the supervisors. You know, hey, how are things this week? And we'll have a little meeting. They'll sign off. It's a weekly basis, and then at the end, you know, I would recommend either they could repeat the phase, you know, the entire phase, make recommendations from there, or, you know, recommend that they go on to the next phase.
And over the course of your duties as a field training officer, were there trainees that you recommended repeat the phase that you were training them on?
Yes.
What did you do with Aaron?
I recommended he go on to the next phase.
Did he do so?
Yes, sir.
Have you and Aaron kept in touch since you were his field training officer?
Yes, sir.
In fact, have you kept in touch with him after the event that we're here about today?
Yes, sir.
Did you talk to him soon after? What was his demeanor at that time?
He was, I mean, as you can imagine, he was pretty torn up. He was devastated. I remember that I was out somewhere with family and got a call from him. And he was pretty devastated.
Absolutely.
Cross-examination.
Yes, just briefly. You just talked about him reaching out and keeping in touch with you. What did he tell you had happened about in this particular case?
He didn't give specifics, and I didn't want to ask. He basically said, hey, you know, I was involved in a shooting last night. I don't remember exactly what he said. I do recall not wanting to ask just because I've been on scene and involved in certain things, and I never wanted to ask an officer, you know, about that right off the bat. I just didn't feel comfortable doing that, and I didn't know how he would react to it, so I kind of just was there to listen to whatever he said.
Okay, and over the last 3 years, have you guys talked about what happened?
No, not in detail. I've asked him about the case, how things are going, things like that. I never initiated that kind of stuff with him because I figured he talked about it enough with his lawyers and family. Then whenever I would talk to him, it was kind of like a escape. You know, we did lunch a few times, I think, and talked about meaningless things, sports and whatnot.
Do you want to know?
Do I want to know what?
Do you want to know what happened?
I have an idea of what happened, but I don't know the facts of everything of the case now.
Well, sure, because you weren't able to sit in here in the last few weeks, correct?
No, I was not here. No, ma'am.
And you haven't reviewed any evidence in the case, correct?
Just what I saw on TV.
Right, and what's on TV isn't evidence, but as far as what the actual evidence and the facts of this case, you haven't had the opportunity like the jury has, correct?
You're correct. Yes, ma'am.
Right. And there's been various witnesses that have testified, and you haven't had the benefit of hearing them, correct?
No, like you said, just what I saw on TV.
Okay. And when you talked about the training, so overall, you have supervised him and watched him as a police officer for a total of about 4 weeks, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then after that, he went on to be on the street as a patrol officer for another 18 months or so before this happened?
Yes, ma'am. After the next phases of training, then he was cut loose to be, yes, an officer on the street.
Never observed his conduct, interactions with folks after your 4 weeks with him, right?
I believe that to be correct. Yes, ma'am.
And you said he's not a people person, that's just the way that he's made, right?
That's the way I perceived him. Like I said, I was with him for a month.
Not that long. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And when we talked about the academy, you certainly went to the academy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And in the academy, there are different training scenarios that you go through in order to determine, just try to teach people what to do and what not to do, right?
Yes.
And a lot of times those trainings are real life cases, and
Yes,
you know
ma'am.
that, right?
Yes.
And to be fair, typically it's when things went really bad or wrong, right?
In the academy, most of the scenarios are set up that way. Yes.
Sure. Something happened and it went south, and how do we avoid that from happening again, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because in a controlled environment, that's the opportunity that we have. We're outside of the streets. We have all these field training officers, all these training supervisors. Let's do it the right way so that this thing never happens again, correct?
Yes, that's the goal.
That's the goal, right? Is to avoid anybody getting harmed, and that's both officers and the public, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. And are you aware that this particular scenario that occurred on October the 12th of 2019 is now utilized in the Fort Worth Police Department Academy to train against this not ever happening again?
I was not aware of that. No.
I'm going to pass the link, Sean.
Regret.
In the academy during training, what are you taught to do if someone points a firearm at you?
Well, I perceive that to be a deadly threat.
And how do you react to that deadly threat?
To eliminate the threat.
Pass the witness.
Ms. Diener,
Nothing further, Your Honor.
may detective duty be excused subject to any potential recall.
And no objection from the state.
You may.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. See how many more character witnesses?
Mr. Gill?
Donna Dean.
Donna Dean.
This must be the
Yes,
the
that's right.
sister, the woman I thought was the wife a few days ago, but I've been told now she's oh no, that must be the mother. There you go.
Would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Have a seat, please. Mr. Gill?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you tell the jury your name, please?
I'm Donna Dean.
Donna, are you Aaron's mother?
Yes, I am.
And would you tell the jury what your immediate family consists of, please?
My husband and I have been married for 46 years, and we have 6 children. The oldest is a daughter, and then 4 sons and a younger daughter. 2 sons are married, and we have 4 grandchildren.
Would you tell us the names of your children, starting from oldest to youngest?
Ashley, Aaron, Andrew, Austin, Adam, Alyssa.
Oh, it's one of those families, all A's.
Are several of the kids here today?
Yes, they are.
And could you tell us your husband's name?
She likes
Larry.
the letter A.
Is he here today also?
He is, yes.
And have you all been present here for most of the trial?
Yes, we have been here for all of it.
Those people are really do a little alliteration in their family.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I guess it could be worse. It could all be named George, right? Like George Foreman.
Well, the first 2 were kind
Georgina,
of like we
yeah.
like those names, and after that, we just said, hey, this is the pattern. We'll just keep it up.
Have they ever been referred to as the 18?
6 A's usually. That's what they're referred to.
So where is Aaron in the chronology of children?
He's the second born.
So he has an older sister, Ashley, and then it was Aaron.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
So how old is Aaron today?
Aaron is 38.
And was Aaron and the rest of your kids, were they all raised here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
Yes, yes.
Primarily where?
In Arlington,
Was Aaron born in Arlington?
yes,
Pretty much lived in Arlington his entire life?
yes.
Where did the kids go to school?
We homeschooled our children all the way through high school.
So you were the school mom for 6 kids?
Yes, sir.
So were you a stay-at-home mom then?
Yes. I was formerly a nurse, but I stayed home with my children once they were born.
Was that about the time the kids started getting to school age, you decided to stay home?
Yeah, a little bit earlier, but yeah.
Okay. So what kind of work did Larry do?
For a number of years, he was self-employed with a computer business. His primary clients are small businesses. He's their IT person. He's done some other things after the economy crashed in 08 and 09. It took down several of our clients. And he did some private security work, and he still maintains some clients he's had for years.
So he's mostly retired, but still has a few good clients he takes
Yes.
care of.
Mm-hmm.
So what did the homeschooling consist of?
With homeschooling here in Texas, the parents are responsible for everything from curriculum selection, planning, how to implement the curriculum, daily scheduling, evaluating students, and bringing them to completion, or if somebody wants to enter their children into a classroom.
So at some point, Aaron earned a high school degree,
He did.
and after high school, what did he decide to do?
He entered University of Texas at Arlington as an honors student in the engineering program.
And did he eventually earn a degree?
He did. He has a bachelor's degree in physics, and it's a minor in engineering.
And then he went to work at the engineering field?
Yes, he did. He actually worked in engineering some while he was a student.
At some point, he decided to change careers.
He did.
He decided to become a police officer.
Yes, sir.
You know why he did that?
He told us he wanted to do it because he wanted to make a difference in people's lives and to help people.
So how did the kids treat each other growing up?
Really, they all got along pretty well. There's some normal sibling rivalry, but there was a lot of love and compassion. And Aaron liked to dote on the younger sister, who's 10 years younger. When she was about 2 or so, he liked to put her down for her afternoon nap, and he'd go, see, if I put her down, I'd let her pick 1 or 2 of her stuffed animals or something, but Aaron would let her pick a whole selection of them and bring them to bed.
So what's that young sister's name?
Alyssa.
And she's here with us.
Yes, she is.
Right? So, what kind of guy is Aaron?
He's smart. He's a hard worker. He definitely wants to help people, and he's very faithful in carrying out his responsibilities. He's very industrious, often, and has a lot of ingenuity.
Does he have the ability to follow rules?
Yes, sir. He was a good rule follower.
Has he been doing that his entire life?
Yes, I mean, it's, children have to be corrected, but Aaron didn't break rules or anything as a young person or a teenager.
How does he deal with other people? How's he around other folks?
He enjoys talking to people. He has a lot of wide-ranging interests. So oftentimes he has conversations with people from all walks of life. Her testimony about he's a musician, he loves history, he's well read on a variety of topics, including many literature topics, classic literature. So he can converse on many topics and enjoys that, with talking with people and doing projects with people, helping.
How does he help other people?
Over the years, he's, when he was younger, when he was high school or college, I think it was maybe in college, he was, several times he would house sit for some friends when they were gone, different friends, varying friends. And he had some interesting experiences. He grew up, we had a cat, and then some of these friends had cats and dogs and fish and chickens. And he did yard work typically. One friend was a widow lady and needed a lot of help around her place. She had a place with not acreage, but a very large yard, and it needed some work, and Aaron would often go over and help do the yard work or make repairs.
When he was growing up, did he have any particular hobbies?
Yes. He loved to build with any kind of the construction toys that kids play with, Legos. We did a lot of Legos and Connects. A lot of kids like to build their Lego model, as it pictures, and then they set it on a shelf, and that's great. They've got a great display. Aaron's idea was you'd build it, and he looks at it and say, "I wonder what happens if," And then he always loved airplanes, aircraft, and one day as he was getting into probably, I'm going to guess about the 9th grade when he did geometry, 8th or 9th grade. And I couldn't figure out where he was. And I looked and he was in the garage and he had this a lot of paper out there. And he was out there measuring and everything. And he said, "I just figured out how to make the angles on the airplane, on the wings, correct. And now I know how to make these wings right." So, yeah.
Did he enjoy woodworking?
Yes. He did. He started that. The first thing I remember he did was he was probably about 12. I'm not really certain. It's just very simple. He took 2 almost like sticks of wood, but kind of cut on some and notched them and then put them together to form a cross. And on it he wrote, "Jesus loves you." And he gave it to me. And I still have it on my dresser at home.
Did you tell me about a couple of things he did for other folks while he was in high school and college?
Yes. When he was in college, especially, because he lived at home, but he was obviously on the campus most of the time, most of the days. And a lot of times he would eat at fast food places or whatever. And on several occasions, he encountered people who were in need or were homeless, and he would help them. The first incident that I remember, I think it was in his freshman year of college, and they start school in August, where it's very hot here. And he was at a fast food place up in by UTA.
Object, Your Honor. Can I take this witness on board, Ira?
Yes.
Ma'am, how do you know about what happened at UTA? Did the defendant tell you?
He told me.
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Sustained.
Were there occasions where you observed him helping other folks?
Certainly there were. Besides the friends that I told you about, there was one homeless man in particular that he helped, and I know he helped him because he gave the man our home phone number. Back then, people didn't use their cell phones except for emergencies. And one day I got a phone call, and it was from the city jail, and wanted to know if I would take a call from, I don't remember what his name was now. It's been 20 years ago. But it was the same person that Aaron had encountered. And this man was going to be released, and he needed some help. He didn't know where to go. And anyway, various things happened. We had contact with him off and on, and ended up suggesting that Aaron put him in contact with the Union Gospel Mission here in Fort Worth for some ongoing help.
So is that typical of the kind of thing that?
Yes. And one time too, another time I was present, our church had a game night on a Friday evening, and we had food and everything, and we cleaned up, and a car pulls up with man and woman and I think 2 children, I don't remember. And they said that they were needing food and money, and Aaron immediately began getting the food that we had just packed up, getting food out to help them and that kind of thing. So,
If the jury were to see fit to give Aaron a probated sentence, would Aaron be able to follow the rules that the Judge Gallagher gives him, no matter what they are?
absolutely. He's had to follow bond rules for the last 3 years, which I think there's a fair amount of similarity. I noticed that one of the conditions is they have to have employment. And when Aaron, well, obviously he lost his job for the police department, and he needed to try to find work. And he's began working for a friend who had a business cleaning dinner hoods on a restaurant, but this was just before COVID. When COVID hit, all the restaurants closed down, so he hadn't had a job. And throughout that time with COVID, there was some dead time in there when nobody could work because businesses were all closed. But then he would begin to apply, see a lot of agencies, I'll call them, I don't know, people who help placement services. And I think of the way some of those work is they'll do a basic background and then they place somebody and then they'll do a more thorough background check. So Aaron was placed into, I have no idea how many jobs, with a whole variety of different things. And then when the full background check would come and they realized he was under indictment, they would say, we can't keep you working here. And I know at least one of them, the supervisor particularly said, I'm going to I really want you to work here. You're a great worker and we really need you. But his company wouldn't let him stay on. So I'm confident that he would find work to do that and follow the rules.
Well, he's managed to keep busy, hasn't he?
He has. He's in the process of, he's got some Suburban that's got some engine work that needs to be done, and he's got some projects going on at my house and a couple of other family members' houses with some repairs and upgrades and so on, in addition to the work he's been doing.
Cross-examination.
Ma'am,
Yes, sir.
is there a much worse pain for a mother to feel than to outlive one of her children?
Object. Don't
I
let
don't
this
know
in.
because I don't outlive one of my children.
But can you imagine?
They're completely objectionable. It's got nothing to do with
Obviously, what happened
sentencing.
in this situation.
They're not
was very
fighting.
tragic.
Why aren't they fighting for him? Come on, guys.
But isn't that one of the greatest pains that a mother can feel, is to outlive one of her children?
Certainly.
And how many brothers and sisters?
That would be
does
true
the
even if there's been a
defendant have?
lawful shooting.
Yeah.
It's 2 sisters and 3 brothers.
2 sisters and 3 brothers. And ever since October 2019, those 2 sisters and those 3 brothers have been able to hug the defendant whenever they wanted. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Objection. Come on. Do
And
not.
you've been able to hug the defendant whenever you wanted. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And his father's been able to hug the defendant whenever he wanted. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And you know, you've been sitting here for 2 weeks, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know that there's a lot of people here who, after October 12th, 2019, had a very important person in their life that they'll never be able to talk to again. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
We'll pass the witness.
Redirect.
Ms. Dean, you were here yesterday in the courthouse, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you were here when the jury reached its verdict,
Yes, sir.
and then we recessed for the evening?
Mhm.
And then did you walk from the courthouse to a car that was parked somewhere downtown?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to this line of questioning that we approach.
No, I'm gonna let him go.
Oh, wow.
My husband went to pick up the car and picked me up.
Okay. Did he pick you up down here next to the courthouse?
Yes,
Were there other members of the family present?
yes.
And was there an incident that occurred out by the street?
There were a lot of people yelling
Yelling at who?
at my family.
What kind of things were they yelling at you?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Sustain.
It's not hearsay if she heard it.
Were the things they were yelling at you true?
Excited utterance, present sense
Were
impression.
they accusations?
Effect
Yes.
on here?
What were they?
I'm not objecting on the hearsay.
Sustained.
It's not hearsay. She's not offering it for the
Hearsay.
truth of this
We were
statement.
offering it because
Yeah.
it was said.
And I would object to relevance.
Understand the objection sustained.
Was it a tense situation?
Yes.
Were those people being kind to you?
No.
Did you feel safe?
Only because there were a lot of sheriff's deputies around.
Was it a very bad situation?
Yes.
Are you concerned about it going forward?
Yes.
You pass the witness.
Mr. Smith?
You've seen Atatiana Jefferson's siblings in this courtroom, haven't you?
Yes.
It wasn't the Tatiana siblings, these people outside yelling keyword, was it?
I don't really know who it was.
You
Irrelevance.
saying them?
There were a lot of people out there hollering. I have no idea who those people were.
So you think it could have been them yelling at you?
And Judge,
I don't
for
know.
the record, we're not saying it was.
We understand.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Gill?
Nothing further, Judge.
May Ms. Dean be excused subject to any potential recall.
She may.
No objection to the state.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, they did bring up something when his mom was on direct that he was following the rules of bond.
Right.
Now, that's important because I try to explain this to my clients. When you're out on bond, that is a job audition for probation.
Yep.
Because if you want to convince a judge, hey, judge, my guy's going to follow the rules, I need to be able to show him that. So if you don't follow the ruals on bond, pretrial guys,
Mr. Brissett?
makes it really hard to convince a judge you're going to follow the rules on probation.
We ask that he be sworn in and put under the rules.
Is there a Mr. Mata in the courtroom?
Just something to think about if you ever end up on a case for
Stand
something
right there
and
at the
the
rail
judge gives you
for me,
rules.
please, sir. Raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the
So they
truth,
keep
so help you God?
swearing these people in. I think these must be like community activists.
Hey, Judge, may we approach?
I don't understand what's going on.
Well, I mean,
I'm
technically
swearing
you're
you
on
in
the
as a
record,
witness.
so
So,
unless you're
all right, jury goes to the jury room.
unless you're an
This guy-
attorney.
I think this guy just gave the judge lip
Oh,
and just
okay.
dismissed the jury. Look at the deputy
Yeah.
inching closer to this guy.
Yeah. But no, I mean, every time if you're not an attorney and you go on the record, you should be under oath. So,
Well, I think they're swearing these people in order to kick them out of the courtroom.
Everyone may be seated.
Ah.
They're
Mr.
swearing them
Mata,
in as witnesses, and then they're
is
not
your
allowed to
name
stay.
Manuel Mata?
Yes, sir.
Your date of birth is 7/8 of 1980.
Yes, sir.
All right. I have issued you an oath to testify truthfully. Are you going to take that oath?
I have a question, sir.
No. Are you going to take that oath?
No.
All right. You are on bond on some cases, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Those bonds are being declared insufficient, Sheriff.
ooh.
What, sir? What's going on?
Under arrest.
What did I do? I need my lawyer present, sir.
We will get you a lawyer.
You question me without a lawyer present.
Oh, jailhouse lawyer.
That was not. Yeah, that one. That's not gonna cut it.
I asked him a question.
Yeah, if you're gonna try to play games with the court, don't be on bond.
And I just wanted to know who's
the best.
asking for me to be sworn in. The DA, the defense, the judge, who's asking it? Those are questions I need answers if you're gonna revoke me. You ain't gotta be a.
That was not smart, folks. So his bond's revoked.
Let me see the lawyers.
He's still yelling.
It's gotta be awesome.
Oh, good gosh. So yeah, he's gonna, and no other judge is gonna release him on bond. There goes his.
Yeah,
He'll be
at
in
least not until
pretrial detention.
at least till Monday or Tuesday.
Oh, I don't know if they'll let him out. They're gonna, I don't know. Other
Well, I don't
judges
know
are
if
gonna see
he's-
this.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's the judge who. I mean, there's also I've been in courthouses where there's politics between the judges. Where if Judge A gives you a bond, Judge B will intentionally say, "I fucking hate that guy," and they will undercut that
Mm.
judge just for the sake of it.
All right, we've got a little pause here. I'll do a super chat, big one, $100 super chat. I posted it up before. on the screen. The ADA misrepresented the Bible in Matthew 6:38-39. Quote, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, offer, no resistance." Oh, excuse me. "But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well." And that's from Blue Tiger. Thank you very much. $100 from Blue Tiger. VMF 0035, $5 super chat. "With the behavior of prosecuting attorneys, why do we not see retribution against them?" Well, I'm not going to forget it, folks. I'm not reading stuff like that. If I'd read that ahead of time, I wouldn't have read it out loud. We're not seeking retribution against anybody, unless, of course, you mean political consequences. Prosecutors are elected. At least the head ones are. They can be unelected the next time there's an election. Let's see. Swissguard 2322, $5 super chat. "I would get in trouble for asking this prosecutor what it feels like to be objectively evil." They're certainly on a mission. Brian D,
Yeah.
$5 super chat. "She's got the crazy eyes." I guess talking about the chick from college who kept her
Yes.
5-page complaint for 18 years in case she ever needed it. Vermillionaire, $5 super chat, writes, "Does Texas give option of trial by judge or by jury? If so, do you think would have been smarter to go with judge so verdict was based on law, not emotion?" So every jurisdiction has an option for a bench trial. They vary in whether or not you can merely request a bench trial or demand a bench trial. In most jurisdictions, if the defendant decides he wants a bench trial, the state has to agree. The state essentially has a right to a jury trial too. There are exceptions. Maryland, for example, if the defendant demands a bench trial, he gets it, and there's nothing the state can say about it.
Ohio's one of them as well.
Ohio as well? You can demand a bench trial?
And I like that because I've heard a prosecutor, we're entitled to fair jury. It's like this, I and the judge looked at me when I said it, but I said, the fair trial is not for you. The fair trial is for the defendant. The state's not entitled to anything.
Right.
And they don't like it when you tell them that.
Yeah. But this is a little different. What we have here is the sentencing. So you have the guilt phase of the trial where it's determined whether or not you're going to be found guilty or not guilty. And then you have the sentencing phase if you're found guilty at the guilt phase. Normally, the sentencing phase is entirely within the control of the judge. There's a couple of jurisdictions, not many, where there's an either the jury always does sentencing, or whether I guess here there's an option in Texas for the defendant to demand that he be sentenced by the jury rather than by the judge. I don't know the details of all that, but that's what's happening here. So because the jury has to decide to sentence, we're in effect having a mini trial on the sentencing now, with witnesses being presented by both sides, and presumably there'll be some kind of closing sentencing argument by the state and by the defense at the end, with each of them pleading for the jury to return a sentence that they think is appropriate.
This is far from the norm for most places, guys.
Right. Yeah. Normally the jury literally has zero to do with sentencing. They're not even supposed to consider what the punishment is for the crime they're considering in the guilt phase. Let's see. Nancy Jennings, $10 super chat. "For such a concerned neighbor, sure wish that he and other neighbors had shared phone numbers. This is just my thought for having contact with each other." I guess she means the neighbor across the street from the victim here. He could have phoned her instead of phoning the police. Brandon Jensen, $5 super chat. "Wow, Daryl Brooks made it to the Fort Worth for a special guest appearance." I guess that guy did look a little bit like Daryl Brooks. So, folks, I don't know who these people are that keep getting sworn in as witnesses. They're not testifying, so they're not actually witnesses. I think the judge is just doing that as a rationale for then excluding them from the courtroom, because if you're a potential witness, you're not supposed to be in the courtroom. I don't know if they're known troublemakers or known community activists, or I have no idea, but clearly the judge doesn't want them in the courtroom, because the moment the defense points them out, they get sworn and then they're basically tossed. This guy wouldn't take the oath. So basically he's talking shit to the judge, and the judge doesn't like it. Turns out he's out on bond. So the judge basically revoked his bonds, at least transitorily. And so he got cuffed up and taken away.
Now, have they done this throughout the trial? This exact
They've done
type
it
of,
at least 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
Okay.
So the very first day, the first witness in the trial for the state when they were presenting their case in chief a week ago Monday was the one eyewitness other than the officer who fired the shot, who was the 8-year-old at the time who was being babysat by the victim. He testified. And while he was testifying on direct, there was somebody in the audience gesturing to him, someone in the gallery gesturing to him. And that was pointed out by the defense. That woman got sworn and kicked out of the courtroom. That was the first one, but there's been 3 or 4 since then.
I'm surprised they didn't swear her in, put her on the stand, and voir dire her outside the jury to figure out what the hell she was doing.
The judge questioned her a little bit, but I think they turned the mics off for part of that. So I don't know all the detail. All I know is that she ultimately, the cameras went down for part of that. So I'm not sure what actually happened in the courtroom there. John Scott, $5 super chat. I'm growing frustrated by the passivity of the defense attorneys and inability to object and defend against objections. You know, not a lot of this judge doesn't sustain a lot of objections. I don't know. I mean, of course, there's multiple reasons to object. One of them is hopefully the judge will rule your way. The other is you got to preserve stuff for the record, especially in Texas. So you can preserve it for appeal. So I don't know what's going on with these defense attorneys. Mr. Steve VC, $5 super chat. Whose witness was the guy that just got removed? He's not really a witness. These people are being sworn as witnesses because if you're sworn as a witness, you can't be present in the gallery, in the courtroom. So I believe the judge is just doing this as a mechanism to prohibit them from the courtroom and prohibit them from talking to anybody about the case, because that's part of being a witness as well. But I don't know who he is. He was certainly not cooperative. Let's see. He was a very disagreeable gentleman. Okay, what do we got here for member questions? Questions from Kansaki. Why would the Fort Worth Police Department and Probation's Office work with prosecutor's office after this? Well, I mean, these are all just people with jobs, folks. This is no one's going to throw away their career over Aaron Dean.
Yeah. They may hate it, but at the end of the day, you gotta go back to work.
Let's see. Question from Edward, law self-defense member Edward. By the way, folks, if you're a law self-defense member, you don't have to pay like a super chat, $5 minimum to get a question answered. I answer all the questions from the members. You can be a member right now. Instead of sending in $5 super chats one after the other, just become a law self-defense member right now and put your questions in the law self-defense chat on the dashboard, and I'll answer all of them. That's the way to go. It's less than $10 a month, folks, about 30 cents a day to get all your questions answered. And you can become a law self-defense member right now at lawselfdefense.com/join. So from law self-defense member Edward, question, given how little defense is done for the accused, do you think that they didn't bother vetting the disruptive witness? Well, I think they knew who he was. The defense pointed him out. So I think there was adequate vetting. Let's see. Donnie writes, the ignorance of prosecutors, judges, and defense attorneys never ceases to amaze me. Yeah, you think because we watch TV and the movies that all these professionals in the courtroom know everything and make no mistakes. Yeah. Folks, we wouldn't have an appellate court system if everything was perfect at the trial level. Yeah. These are, they're often very good lawyers and judges, and they're often not particularly good. And nobody's perfect. I think that's all the member questions.
Oh, I was going to say, somebody in the chat asked, why do judges tend to rule in favor of the state? Because they are the state. They are the government. So, the government likes to work with the government. They generally don't hold each other in contempt or hold out as wrong. So think about that. It's 3 branches of government, so they all work together.
Let's see. $5 super chat from Tay Logan. He asks, can the jury possibly be hung on sentencing? If so, then what? I guess they could. I have to be honest, folks. In the jurisdictions I've worked in, we don't do jury sentencing. So I'm not super familiar with how this works. I suppose they have to be unanimous on the sentence. I don't know. Is it possible there could be a super majority on the sentence, just unanimous for guilt?
I don't know.
But Yeah, I mean, I guess in theory they could, if they don't all agree on a sentence, then what do you do, right? You effectively have a hung jury on sentencing. I'm not sure how you would resolve that. If you have a hung jury on the guilt phase, you just it's a mistrial and you just do a whole new trial, or you kick the guy loose and decide not to continue. Okay, we're back. Kingslayer Damocles, $5 says, as far as I'm concerned, the judge is a kidnapper. I guess we're taking that guy out. Attempting to force someone to testify without allowing the Fifth Amendment, the judge hates the law. Well, the guy wasn't being sworn as a witness to testify, folks. He's just being sworn as a witness as an excuse to kick him out of the courtroom.
Yeah, he refused
And the
to take
guy's
the
out on
oath.
bond. I mean, his liberty is conditional. So,
Yes. Well, whether or not you'll take the oath is not a Fifth Amendment violation. You do have to answer some questions.
Everyone may be seated. Mr. Gill, who do you have next?
Adam Dean.
Adam Dean.
I guess the father probably.
Oh, apparently, Manuel Mata is an auditor, First Amendment auditor. So,
What's that mean?
he's one of the guys that goes around like with cameras, and they're entitled to, it's all about
As long as
transparency.
we're affirmed testimony.
They'll
given
bring
this
cameras
cause,
into like
truth,
the water
whole truth,
department,
and
harass the
nothing but
ladies
the
that
truth,
work
so help
there,
you God. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
the
Have a
post
seat.
offices,
Mr. Gill.
those type of guys.
Hey, Adam, how old of a man are you?
I am 30 years old.
Do you have a family?
Yes, sir, I do.
What does your family consist of?
I have a wife and I have 2 born children and 1 more on the way.
What kind of work do you do?
Currently, I am employed as a recruiter or a headhunter. I got into that recently and I'm excited about it.
Okay, so what does a recruiter or headhunter do?
Basically, we are interested primarily in getting 2 parties to speak to each other. We go out and we find individuals we consider candidates, people with a marketable skill set, and we go and look for companies that would be interested in that background and skill set, and we are primarily interested in getting them to sit down and talk and see if it's a good match for both parties.
Do you like that line of work?
Yes, sir. I'm enjoying it very much.
Are you related to Aaron over here to my right?
Yes, sir, I am. He is my older brother.
Okay. Approximately how many years apart are the two of you?
There's about 8 between us.
Well, this guy's manner of speaking is really annoying to me.
Grew up in the same house.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Despite
Just look at
the
that. I don't
8-year
think either.
age difference, were you pretty close?
Yes, sir. We were very
He's a
close.
very
Obviously,
smug-looking
when I was
Joe.
younger, I don't remember some of the things. I do remember that he would help us with a variety of projects. I actually remember, as odd as it sounds, taking a bath with him at one point somewhere in my very early childhood.
What kind of projects would he help you with?
Well, as you've heard already, he was quite the engineer, quite the mechanic, and he constructed a number of Lego and Kinects and other kinds of objects, and he enjoyed doing that, enjoyed being with his family doing that, and he would help me with, and my siblings with those kinds of things as well.
Was he a fun brother to grow up with?
He was. We had a number of adventures together, a number of enjoyable activities, as well as the occasional headbutting.
As the two of you have grown older, what kind of man has Aaron grown into?
Well, Aaron has become a very mature man of integrity, a man who is interested in helping others, in caring for others, serving others. I would say a man who cares about honor and wanting to do the right thing.
How would you describe his personality?
He is very analytical, should come as no surprise to you. He has both a serious and a light, fun side. We make fun of him a little bit for being a little too self-serious occasionally, but he has plenty of humor. He can speak to people. He's very interested in a number of different areas. We've already heard some of those kinds of things. He enjoys learning about those things. He is self-taught in many of the areas you have heard described.
You described that you have a couple of kids, a couple of born kids.
Yes, sir. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son.
Do they know Aaron?
Yes, they do, very well. Recently, I got into weightlifting, and again, as the engineer, I knew that Aaron was the one who I would call to help me build a weight rack in my bedroom. And during his time there, he began to interact with, especially at that time, my son had not been born yet, and he interacted with my daughter. And she is very particular about who she likes, who she lets hold her or talk to her. And just after a couple of weeks of being there and engaging in that, she began to ask when Uncle Aaron would come next, when the next time she could see him was.
Are you familiar with his work with the children's choir?
Yes, sir, I am.
What, describe that to you.
So as you have heard, of course, he grew up in that program, in the high school program. You heard, of course, earlier from Mrs. Armstrong, and he led the children's choir that they did occasionally when Mr. Armstrong needed him to. He was very good at providing direction for those kinds of things, helping the younger ones learn and grow and be able to engage in the activities they need to.
How does Aaron approach tasks when he has something he has to get done?
Well, I would say he is very interested in figuring out what he's got in front of him. He wants to make a plan. He wants to understand the nature of the thing. He will often set about making drawings or spending a good amount of time planning, calculating, trying to figure out the best way to go about that. And then he throws himself wholeheartedly into it. If he needs to learn something, if he doesn't know, he will go and find someone or find a source that he can learn from to understand what it is that he needs to do and continue forward with it.
You've known him throughout his adulthood. Has he ever been convicted of any type of criminal offense?
No, sir.
Is he a hard-working
Well,
guy?
Very much so.
no little contender to an assault charge is.
Is he a creative guy?
Very much so, yes, sir. There are numerous occasions. In fact, this weightlifting rack that I've spoken of,
when that happened.
we put our heads together to determine how we wanted to go about that, and we actually bought one off of Amazon and deconstructed it, modified it for its use in my bedroom with a less amount of space than you would traditionally use. Aaron was the one who took care of all of that, figured it all out.
If he were to be placed on probation, do you have an opinion as to whether or not he'd be able to follow any rules that Judge Gallagher would set out for him?
Absolutely. I have no doubt that there would be no difficulty whatsoever in following those. He has followed faithfully the bond rules that have been set for him. Throughout my time knowing him in interactions with other organizations, hierarchies where there are rules, Aaron is not the one who goes and skirts around the rules or figures out how he can get what he wants to do, thinking that he's above them or going to go do his own thing regardless.
We pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
No questions, Your Honor.
May Mr. Dean be excused subject to any potential recall.
You may.
No objection from the state.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, folks, I'm getting tired.
Mr. Gill.
Alyssa Dean.
Alyssa Dean.
Yeah, this
We
is
get
the
it,
woman I
he's-
thought was his wife, but I believe it's his sister.
He's a nice boy. He didn't do nothing wrong. We get it.
Someone swear or affirm testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Have a seat right here.
I
Mr.
do.
Gill.
Take your swing.
Tell us your name, please.
Alyssa Dean.
I doubt it.
And are you Aaron's younger sister?
I am.
Did you hear your mom testify? a few
Don't
minutes
smile
ago?
too much.
Are you the younger sister that Aaron?
This is a murder trial. You cannot be smiling like you won the
How are
fucking
you
lottery.
occupied on board?
I am a police officer.
Are you a police officer for one of the departments here in the Metroplex?
Yes, I work here in DFW.
And like the rest of the family, were you raised here in the Arlington area,
I was.
homeschooled?
Yes.
How much younger than Aaron are you?
10 years.
But despite that, did you have a close relationship growing up?
Yes. So my mom's already told you the story about him being willing to get me whatever stuffed animal I wanted when I napped, which she said I was 2, but that continued further into my childhood than that. I remember, because I can remember it, I remember being upset that I had to go take a nap while the rest of my siblings got to play. And so to console me, Aaron would bring me, again, whatever stuffed animal, however many I wanted for my nap time. I also remember in the summer, we would go see my grandparents who lived in Reno every year. And they had property and they had horses. And Aaron would take me horseback riding every year when we were out there.
You had pretty good memories growing up.
Yes.
How long have you been a police officer?
7 years.
So were you actually a police officer before Aaron
Yes.
became a police officer?
Yes.
What kind of guy is Aaron?
Hardworking, humble, caring. You've heard already from my family that he has a lot of projects, and he does. He has a lot of different interests and likes to do a lot of things. He's actually been in the process of helping me remodel my bathroom at my house. Which is something he took on himself to do, and has ripped it down to studs, and we're in the process of rebuilding it.
You said and gave us an example of how he's hard working. You said he was humble also. Describe that to us.
I remember conversations when Aaron was going through the academy. Of course, I had already been through my academy by that time. I was an officer. And awareness that he was tackling a new field. It was very different from what he had done before, and that he did not know everything, and he knew he didn't know everything, and he was eager to learn every day. He was eager to get in there and learn what it was about.
Does Aaron have an ability to follow rules?
Yes,
Does he follow society's rules?
absolutely.
As a component of the criminal justice system, do you feel like he'd be able to follow the rules that Judge Gallagher gives to him?
Absolutely. My family's already referred that he's, of course, followed his bond conditions for the last 3 years. But he would have no desire not to. I mean, he lives his life according to those rules anyway. That wouldn't be an issue for him.
You understand that while you may continue to be a police officer, that Aaron is done being a police officer?
I do.
We'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
You've had your brother, and you just talked about it, the last 3 years or so, he's been helping you around the house. You've been able to see him, right?
Yes.
And you've been able to talk to him,
Yes.
hug him.
Yes.
In fact, you just touched him on the shoulder when you walked in.
I
You can
did.
still touch him with your hands.
I can.
And you know that's not something that this family over here to my left, the second row right here, do you know Darius Carr? You don't know him, right?
But I saw him speak earlier.
Sure, but you don't know him.
I do not know.
And you don't know Ashley.
I do not.
And you don't know Amber, who's in the hospital.
No.
And you know, though, that they don't get that same opportunity.
I do know.
And they will never get to do that. You know that?
I do know it.
And as far as what we talked a little bit earlier about this with another family member, you also grew up in a very religious family, correct?
Yes.
And honor and follow the teachings of the Bible, correct?
Yes.
You're familiar with the numerous Bible verses that deal with an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Object again.
That's correct.
Yes.
Old Testament, New Testament, both.
Yes.
All right.
Like, bitch ain't Jewish. The Old Testament does not bind me.
About your brother being humble.
We're not a
and
theocracy.
caring. You love him,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yes. If I'd have been up there, I'm like, I believe in Sharia law. Why are you talking to me?
We are very close.
And both of you guys were the only two of the 6 siblings that went into law enforcement yourself. Did he do that because of you?
Actually, most of my siblings have had an interest in law enforcement at one time or another. We're just the only 2 who ended up pursuing it.
And so, did he go into it because of you?
No.
Okay. And so both you guys were police officers at one point.
Yes.
You heard him testify this week, right?
Yes.
And you heard him grade himself as far as his performance out there, right?
I did.
And he gave himself a B?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Sorry, it's just because she has to take it down.
But yes.
And the grade that he gave, the B grade, do you feel like that's a humble grade to give when a life is lost?
I think it is very hard to give a grade when you're not given a rubric to grade by.
Sure.
A rubric
Good
to
answer.
grade by. Rubric? Are you?
And so do you agree with the grade of B then? for
Like I
his-
said, I
If you'll let me finish my question.
I'm sorry.
It's just because we can't interrupt each other and I've got to finish before you answer, vice versa. So do you agree that with your brother then for the grade of B, with his performance out there at the scene?
like I said, without being given some kind of grading tool to use, I can't agree with that. I mean, all tests have to be given some kind of criteria to grade them by, correct?
Sure, and so when Dale gave the A to F, he gave the grade B, and you don't disagree with that grade?
Again, without defining what an A and a B and a C would be. I mean, any test you take, someone has to grade that test based on some example, right? You can't just make up a grade. So without being given that grading scale, I can't agree or disagree.
Okay, so in your mind, there's nothing that he should have done any better out there? Yes or no? Yes.
In my mind, no,
There's nothing he could have done any better out there?
no.
I'm gonna pass the Sean.
Mr. Gill?
Alyssa, you know, as a police officer, that every time you show up for shift, there's a possibility that something bad is gonna happen that evening, right?
I do.
You know that officers get killed and injured all the time in the United States of America, isn't that right?
Yes, there were 2 officers killed just this week in Bay St. Louis.
What kind of call were they on?
I believe it was,
No,
poss-
fact. It's now outside the scope, it's not relevant.
It's just a,
It's something that, I assume your academy, you went to a different academy than Aaron went to?
I did.
They train use of force in your academy?
Yes, very extensively.
Were you trained if you faced a deadly threat? Did you answer that deadly threat with deadly force?
Yes.
Would you be surprised if any other police department across the United States trained any differently?
I would be shocked if anyone trained any differently.
And that's what officers have to deal with every day, is that right?
Yes. Split-second decisions.
We pass the witness.
Ms. Dean?
Do you disagree with the jury's verdict? Yes or no? You either agree with it or you don't.
You asked if I disagree?
Yeah, do you disagree with the verdict?
Yes.
You do,
As
don't
his
you?
sister, yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Gill?
Nothing further, Ron.
May Ms. Dean be excused subject to any potential recall.
No judgment of the state.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Oh, she did a fine job.
Gill?
Mr. Dean rests.
All right.
State have any?
Well, let's see what happens now.
Ashley Carr.
Ashley Carr.
This is the sister who testified at trial for no apparent reason. She really only gave spark of life evidence, but that testimony would be more appropriate here.
You testified previously, right?
Yes.
Okay, remind you that you're still under oath, okay? Ms. Keener?
And permission to post, I believe it's already been admitted, Stacy's doing 91.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Ashley, you're the same Ashley Carr that testified during the guilt innocence phase, is that right?
Correct.
Now here to testify in the punishment phase, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I want to talk to you just a little bit about the relationship of this young man and Atatiana that we see in Stacy's 91, okay?
Mhm.
All right. Tell me, I know now, and maybe you've always been, are you kind of like a second mom to Zion?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
My sister Amber was the first one of us to.
I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to object. This is outside the scope of this hearing.
Response?
And I believe this is a punishment phase, and so I'm about to ask her questions regarding the impact that it's had on, now that Tatiana's no longer here, her relationship.
Let's get to that then, okay?
Okay, so I think you were answering a question about Amber had the first.
So my sister Amber, out of all four of us, is the first one to have children. So Zion was our first nephew. Yes, she did birth him, but he was our baby. I was the aunt that bought things. Tay was the aunt that played with the things that I bought.
Okay, and so was it Tatiana, was she like a second mom to him?
Yes, as well. So he really had three moms.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you said she's the one that would actually play with
Any
him.
dads?
Would she also make sure that he followed certain chores and responsibilities, things like that, especially when she was living there with him?
Yes, she believed that, structure is needed for children so that they can feel safe and know that, what's coming next. She had made him a schedule of what you're supposed to do in the morning and had it on the refrigerator.
Now that,
Yes.
All right. James, Law Self-Defense member James comments, let this guy, presumably the brother who just testified, serve as a hope for all of you. Even he got laid 3 times, at least 3 times. He's got 3 children. Good point.
Oof.
Kevin W, $10 super chat says, jury instruction explicitly had the words unlawful. How can we know if they objected to the phrasing if that part was not televised? Well, I only know what was televised, folks. So if it wasn't televised, I wouldn't know. Yeah. So is it possible they objected to but I don't believe they objected because they first of all, no one attempted to clarify. The defense didn't in terms of the self-defense instruction. And when the state treated it as an unlawful, as an independent element, as opposed to something that falls within the scope of reasonable perception, the defense just bought into it. There was no counter argument that I saw.
Yeah, I think those are good indicators. They didn't actually object.
Let's see. Oh, they're sending the jury out, I guess. I guess they're going to voir dire this witness and try to get a sense of what she plans to testify to. I think the defense feels vulnerable here. Paul, Law Self-Defense member Paul in Florida writes, I'm getting a real education on the realities of a trial here. Well, that's why we do what we do, folks. All of us law tubers. That's why we do this stuff. That's why we cover these trials. That's why it's important these trials are televised so the public can see the sausage being made in the criminal justice system. It's not at all how it's presented in movies and TV. I can assure you of that.
Yeah, and and the shorter ones are really, like, most trials are not, like you've mentioned it too, but most trials are 2-3 days. That's it.
Yeah, even murder trials are usually
a
couple days.
Could have had 3 or 4 Aaron Dean trials.
Kyle, Law of Self-Defense Kyle asks, hypothetically and just for fun, now that this defendant's in real trouble, could he now become a Law of Self-Defense Platinum member and have his appellant attorneys get your services? No, folks, I don't even know why that's a question. You can't get in trouble first and then get a free legal consult later. That's rather the whole point of having to be a member first. We did have a guy earlier this year do that. He became a Law Self-Defense Platinum member for something he did 2 years ago and then wanted a legal consult. It doesn't work that way, folks.
Okay, we just talked about that she believed in structure and that there was some sort of a schedule that was on the refrigerator.
Yes.
I want to ask you about Zion specifically. Now that she is not in his life anymore and hasn't been over the last 3 years, has he had to go to counseling?
Yes.
Okay, tell me
Of
about
course
that.
he has. He was eyewitness to a fatal shooting.
Zion feels that this is his fault,
Why
But he's
would you
also
let
not
this
staying
fall?
up till 2:30 in the morning.
that he burnt
So-
the burgers that night. And if he didn't
Which is
have
really
burnt the
weird to me.
burgers, the doors wouldn't have been open and the cops wouldn't have came. So it all goes back to him in
Well,
an 8-year-old mind.
That's all true.
And it's when everyone is hurting around him, it was hard to console him. So we found help outside of us.
Was it difficult last week for him to testify?
Extremely.
After he testified, did he have some emotional reaction to this whole process?
Yes.
What?
So much so that he did not go to school for the next couple of days after that, so that we can make sure that he feel comfortable. He was having panic attacks, just outbursts. An 11-year-old can't express why you're frustrated and why you're mad.
Judge, that was it. That's the only remaining questions that I had to ask.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Do you have objections?
Oh,
Well, actually, let me be clear. The only other questions I did intend to ask her is if she or her brother were part of yelling at any of his family member yesterday afternoon. Outside of that, I did not have any additional subject matter to cover.
Let me say this in front of everybody. The way both of these families have behaved in this courtroom, I have no doubt that the Carr family was not involved in any of that. And I have appreciated their demeanor, just as I've appreciated the demeanor of the Dean family. I thank both families throughout this trial. So that's not necessary, in my opinion, Ms. Dinger. Mr. Gill.
however, Judge, if the state wants to ask those questions, we are not going to object to that because.
Oh, this is voir dire.
Part of that either. I think
The person we just took
went
in,
through the holdover door a few minutes ago.
that's my understanding also, is the person who was involved. All right,
But we do have an objection to the way that the this victim impact evidence has taken a turn away from the impact of the death of Atatiana Jefferson to impact of court proceedings. I don't believe that there's any relevance to how someone feels after court proceedings. Yes, I don't believe it's valid back to victim impact testimony.
I've got a couple of concerns based upon her testimony thus far when she stated that Zion said it's his fault because he burned the hamburger. We're getting into hearsay. That's my first thing.
That was going to be my next thing.
What up?
I was just gonna ask, may I be permitted to ask him if he's sad?
That's an objection calling for hearsay.
His demeanor?
Oh, his
That's
demeanor,
actually his,
you can-
yeah, his demeanor is not, his reactions are not
But you
hearsay.
can't, you can't go into statements that other people have said outside of court. So that's where I'm coming from. Any other objections?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to allow you to ask her generally about Zion. Has he had problems as a result of this? Has he sought counseling? Did that counseling have to either increase or intensify as a result of the trial?
Oh,
I want to keep it real general. Okay? Mr. Smith.
What about missing school?
I'll let you ask that.
Missing school because of the incident and the trial?
Correct. You may have an objection if you choose running objection to that. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, object to it. It doesn't hurt you to object.
All right. Both sides ready for the jury?
State's ready.
Yes.
This whole running objection thing is bullshit. I mean, it's convenient for the judge.
If they allow it, it's fine. But they need
It complicates
to object as
the
much as they
records. It
can.
makes the record ambiguous for appeal.
Well, I think they could say we're objecting to her entire line of questioning, and wherever established, we object to every single thing she could talk about. I agree, but it's either way. They don't object half the time anyway, so I'm happy they're at least doing it now.
Everyone may be seated. We are ready to proceed, Ms. Deere.
Okay, before the break, I was asking you about the relationship of Zion and Tatiana, and you were talking about the chores that were on the refrigerator. Have you been able to observe how this and the loss of Tatiana has affected him?
Yes, I have.
Tell me about that.
Since this has happened, Zion has been placed with an IEP in school for social emotional learning.
Okay, what is you just said in an acronym, say it again?
IEP.
IEP?
It's a plan to make sure that he's able to be the best successful that he can be in school. So there'll be some times that he will have outbursts. Emotions will come from nowhere, and he's in the middle of class, things like that. And in the plan, we've given him a space where he can just be by himself, to breathe through it, to also have a buddy at the school. So, but it's not a student, it's an adult buddy, that he can feel confident in talking to them, and them helping him talk through the stress at that moment.
Has he had to go through counseling after Tatiana died?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, all this happened, I guess, at the beginning of the pandemic. So he was doing play therapy. But then when the pandemic happened, everybody kind of stopped, and he was doing virtual therapy. But he's a kid, so virtual therapy wasn't really for him. So we were able to find him in-person therapy where he's been attending.
Has that counseling had to increase over the last few months or weeks in proceeding for the trial?
Well, it increased. Every time we got a delay, it increased.
Has he had to miss school because of some of these issues?
Yes. Sometimes he wakes up and frightened. Sometimes he wakes up crying where he can't understand why he's uncontrollably crying. We just don't want to send him into an environment where his emotions are not intact for that day. So luckily the teachers have been working with us and sending, the work home or things like that, or telling us what he's missed, because they all understand that this is something traumatic for him.
Cross-examination.
No questions, Judge.
Say Ms. Carr be excused again, subject to potential recall.
You may.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Smith.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Texas rests.
We close.
State of Texas closes as well.
All right, that's all of the evidence that you will hear. And I'm going to talk to the lawyers. Y'all retire to your jury. I'll be back to visit with you.
You're muted. Andrew, you're muted.
Okay. Well, I guess we're going back into the waiting game again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I started munching on a snack right there, so I didn't want to have the chewing noises go into the microphone, which is unfortunate. But let's see. No new super chats. A lot of people telling me I'm muted. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that sincerely. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're caught up on the questions. So this was an interesting trial for reasons we most talked about. Mostly the defense seemed extremely weak and passive throughout. It didn't strike me as much of zealous advocacy.
What I mean, if this was a preview of how they acted all week, holy cow, he didn't have a chance. I mean, this is awful. Yeah, no.
I mean, the misstatement of the law in self-defense was bad. On the other hand, he didn't get convicted of murder. So if the jury actually bought the misstatement of self-defense that Atatiana Jefferson had to have been committing an unlawful act, I don't think anyone believes she was committing an unlawful act. So that should have neutralized self-defense as a legal defense right there, the incorrect representation of self-defense. And then it would just be a straight up murder because there's no question he intentionally shot her. I mean, he didn't recklessly shoot her. So the whole reckless manslaughter thing is a misnomer. If he'd had a pistol where, for example, you could cock the hammer or something, and he had cocked the hammer, maybe you could argue that was reckless. He created an unnecessary, unjustified risk of death. But of course, it was just a Glock. None of that happened. His gun wasn't even out at the time he saw her gun. He had to draw it from the holster. So there was nothing reckless about the shooting, and all that other nonsense they did on his cross-examination. The state asking him, well, how would you grade yourself on crossing the street? How would you grade yourself on how you sliced the pie on that doorway? None of that caused her death. They're totally ancillary activities. So it would not be a contributor of recklessness. But that's where they ended up, reckless homicide, which makes it feel like a compromise, reckless manslaughter, I should say, which makes it feel like a compromise verdict. That there were people who were like, I'm not going for murder, and other people saying, well, I'm not going for an acquittal. So we're going to stay here a long time unless we can, the obvious middle path would be to compromise on the reckless manslaughter.
And I know people out there don't like that idea, but people will make those kind of bargains with your freedom. Not necessarily because it's right, but because it's convenient. And they don't want to sit there all day. Which once again, this is the business. This is how it goes.
And really the defense should have addressed that pretty much head on during their closing by making a bigger acknowledgement of the fact that this was a terrible tragedy. And it would be natural to want to hold somebody accountable, but we have laws for a reason. And you can only hold someone criminally liable if they actually violated the law. For things like a bad outcome, a horrible loss of life, monetary compensation, that's what the civil courts are for. But that's not a criminal liability. That's a civil liability.
And if they didn't address that, like I said, that innate unfairness of why did this lady have to die? If they didn't address that, shame on them, because you shouldn't. That's an easy way to address it. These things happen. This is a 1 in a trillion chance this happened. Will it ever happen again? No. But if they didn't, instead they say she got what she deserved. That's, no wonder he got convicted.
So we got an interesting question here that I don't have the answer for. Maybe Sean does, but if not, I bet Steve Gosney would. $5 super chat from Resist Impulse. He asks, What does it mean for lawyers being certified for death penalty cases? Is that state by state or all states? What is the process of certification? I've never worked a death penalty case, folks, so I don't know.
Well, what I can say is I know at least in Ohio, you do take classes. The Supreme Court of Ohio puts them on because death penalty cases are it's the biggest thing. You don't ever want to screw them up. You want it done by the numbers. There are standards. They're readily identifiable. You don't ever want to have to redo these. So yes, they offer classes and you take CLEs for them. And the way it works generally with a death penalty case, you're like the third chair and you get to sit there and you do a couple death penalty cases like that. Then you get to be second chair. You do a couple death penalty cases. Then eventually you're the first chair and you're doing some death penalty cases. Now, typically when there's appointed counsel, you usually get two. If you're not appointed, you could probably get away with one, but generally speaking, if you're facing the death penalty, you're probably indigent. You're not actually able to afford it anyway. But it's to ensure that you get the proper standard of representation because they are very technical issues and not everybody can do them. So like I could not try a death penalty case in Ohio. I haven't been practicing long enough and I have not done the CLE work. So that's the only type of criminal case I cannot actually try. And that's generally the same in a lot of states.
I know in Steve Godin's public defender's office, they have a specialized team of attorneys just for death penalty cases. As you might imagine, the very best, most experienced, most capable attorneys in the office.
Yeah, and for states that have public defender's offices, they have special teams that go out and handle them wherever they pop up.
Here's a $10 super chat from Kevin W. He asks, could the civil settlement be brought up as a mitigating factor of the death? I would think not. They should be completely separate from the criminal liability. The guy doesn't get an acquittal because the family is going to get money. That I don't think any of us want to live in a system like that.
No, and also it's not, it's the city cutting the check. It's not him cutting a check. And the standards of the burden of proof is far different. There's going to be different things that were presented that wouldn't be available here. So yeah, you wouldn't want that to happen.
Let's see. A Law Self-Defense member, John Dobbs, says, I just purchased your Platinum plan, Law Self-Defense Platinum membership. Thank you for having it. Between Rittenhouse and this case, I hope I am never having to use your services. I hope you never have to use my services too. Because you're in a bad situation if you're using my services for the most part. Most of the cases I've worked are felony cases. People are looking at 20 years or more in prison. And as I've said 1,000 times, folks, if you're put in front of a jury, there's a 10% chance you get convicted. I don't care how innocent you are. That's just part of the noise in the system. Juries are dangerous and unpredictable creatures. You do not want to be there at all. It's the worst day of your life. Because no one can guarantee that you don't get convicted. The chance of conviction is never zero. Most of the cases I work, we're fortunate if I prefer to be brought on as early as possible, and usually that's the case within a week or two of the event. And that's where I can have the biggest impact because that's when the prosecution is still thinking about what they want to do with the case. And so we can have a strong influence on their decision-making then. Sometimes people wait too long and they call and the prosecution's already made a full-blown commitment to bring the defendant to trial. And that's tough to change. I have done it. We had a murder case. We were 2 weeks from trial when I was brought on. Well, I was brought on a month out and did my consult and delivered my expert analysis within 2 weeks. And 2 weeks before the murder trial was set to commence, they dismissed the charges. So, but that's not my preference. That's high risk. that's not the way to go.
They've already got in their mind that you're the bad guy. They've already sunk in cost, time, and effort into this.
Right.
Yeah, that's not the time they're going to back down.
Just think how many meetings they've had with their bosses about how well they're going to do in this trial, how much they're looking forward to it. And then 2 weeks ahead, they come in and say, all that money we spent on prep and all the experts we lined up and all this other shit we did, all the scheduling, we don't want to do it. So,
and all that time they're telling the victim's family, like, hey, look, it's a slam dunk. He's going away forever. Well, funny story. That's another part of it too, especially nowadays with all the victims' rights issues.
Yeah, and that was weird. I was brought in because how can I describe it? So I was brought in very late, and only at the the defendant was a young woman in her early 20s, and her dad was footing the legal bill. And he's the one that insisted I be brought on the case. In fact, he had told the defense attorneys he wanted me on the case when the event first happened. And in fact, he called my office to figure out how to get that arranged. But the defense attorneys didn't want me on the case. That happens sometimes, folks. Defense attorneys feel like, they don't want a strange lawyer coming in. It's too many chefs in the kitchen. It's a common sentiment. And they were telling him, don't worry about it. We have a year before trial. We'll get this settled. We'll make this go away. And then it was a month before trial. And the father said, listen, this isn't working. I want you to get law self-defense on the case, and they finally did. And I can tell you, man, that those lawyers called me. They still didn't want me. They were only doing it because they were being compelled.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they thought they understand criminal law well, but what do they really think of self-defense law? And that was probably something still out of their depth.
Yeah, and frankly, they made a lot less money because they would have got paid a lot of money for that trial, and the trial ended up not happening.
Well, and they could have made more off their retainer if they would have settled early and got it resolved.
They were kind of in the worst position because they'd spent the whole year gearing up for the trial. So that was all
that's sunk cost.
Sunk investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Oh, a year sounds like a long time away. When you've got criminal cases, that year that approaches quickly before you know it when you're running a caseload.
Let's see. Question from Law Self-Defense member Kansaki. Oh, I was going to put up the platinum membership. For folks who are interested in what a platinum membership is, I'll put the banner up. Go to lawselfdefense.com/platinum and just read about it. There's no commitment to look at the information. lawselfdefense.com/platinum. From a Law Self-Defense member here, let's see. Question: have either of you, I guess meaning you or I, Sean, ever sat on a jury as a member of a jury? No. I've been selected for a jury in a civil case, and I showed up for court the first day of trial, and it turns out they had settled that morning. So I never actually had to serve as a juror per se, but I was impaneled. But that was it. That's the closest I've ever come. I've been called to jury service a number of times, but never selected except for that one instance.
I filled out a federal jury questionnaire once, but once you write down, hey, I'm an attorney, I know mine went right into the trash. So,
yeah, I couldn't believe they picked me. I mean, what they've never done for me, because I called them up the first couple jury notices I got. I was like, I'm a lawyer. They're like, we don't care. You got to show up anyway. Yes. But then I show up, and I never thought they would sit me. But then they picked me. I even asked, the judge was like, anybody here have any questions? Any reason you shouldn't serve? And I raised my hand and said, well, I'm a lawyer. And he said, I don't care. But thank God they settled the case. So I didn't actually have to sit there for several days in the jury box. Let's see. Member Kansaki, a comment. Also, I've had 10 questions answered by you for the cost of the month of platinum membership, and YouTube didn't take any of that money. Yeah, I think you people who ask me questions via Super Chat are crazy. Every time you pay me that, $10 to answer a question in Super Chat form, first of all, YouTube takes a third of that. Second of all, you just got one question answered for $10. If you were a Law Self-Defense member, I answer all your questions in the member chat. It doesn't cost you anything other than the membership price you're already paying. So I see all these $10
Good
super
value.
chats in YouTube. I'm like, you could all have been members. All of you could have been members. I don't get it, but I guess it's a convenience factor for people, which is fine. You're free to spend your money however you like, of course. Just I might suggest it's not the most efficient expenditure. Let's see. A $5 question here from Kevin W. I asked, I think he asked about whether the civil settlement could be brought up as a mitigating factor because the counseling stuff for the kid was brought up. No, the thing with the kid, that's all kind of spark of life stuff and consequences of the death to the family, and that's all permissible evidence. It's not the cost of the counseling that's being brought up. Although I guess it could potentially be. Kevin W, another $10 super chat writes, thank you, writes, love you, Branca, take my money and shut up. I don't live in the States. Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. Yeah, I can't don't sign up for the platinum membership if you're not in the United States, folks. I guess I just assume that's everyone would know that, but I only do American law. So if you're in the UK or someplace else in the world, I have no idea how they do their self-defense law there.
I got a pretty good idea on how Somali law works, but that's just, taking a stab in the dark.
The U.S., all 50 states, D.C., Puerto Rico, all U.S. territories, I've got that covered. But once we get outside of that, it's maybe, I don't know. Good luck. They tend to be much more hostile to self-defense, at least deadly force self-defense anyway, in most countries, my understanding. But a lot of American deadly force self-defense cases, they're really no big deal because so many of them happen when people are defending their homes, and prosecutors don't like to bring those cases because they're too hard to sell to a jury. When people get in fights out in the street, out in public, then it looks like a much more attractive target for prosecution for a prosecutor. But for any of you who are NRA members, you get one of the NRA magazines. They have that armed citizen page in there, where they have these little vignettes about people who use guns in self-defense, and they never get in trouble, they never get arrested, they never get prosecuted. 50 to 75% of those are home defense cases. So those are the hardest ones for the defender to screw up, and those are the hardest ones for a prosecutor to convince a jury on, because jurors don't know anything about self-defense law. They don't know anything about guns or terminal ballistics or tactics. They don't know anything about any of that, but they all live in a home. And they all know what it would like to be facing an intruder in their home. So you can't sell those cases to jury unless the homeowner really screws up, like, chases the guy down the street and shoots him. It's possible to screw up a home defense case, but you got to work pretty hard at it. Let's see. Kansaki says, question, speaking of self-defense, all the cases you've covered have been gun-related. Do you also do knife, melee, self-defense work? Yeah, the murder case I was just talking about, where we got it dismissed 2 weeks before trial, the young woman was the defendant. She stabbed the guy in the chest with a little knife, a little Spyderco knife, 2.5, 3 inch blade, but it nicked the aorta. And man, I saw the crime scene photos. It looked like someone took a fire hose of blood to that room. Yeah, it was everywhere. So that was a knife self-defense case, and she'd been given the knife by her dad. Her dad had actually paid for her to get some training in how to use a knife in self-defense. But that's what she carried for personal protection. She lived in a state where it would be difficult to get a concealed carry permit, but she had that little Spyderco, and it was kind of a date gone bad situation. And she says the guy was attacking her. She got the knife out, one stab to the chest. That was it, and that was the end of him.
Oh, good on her.
Paul in Florida, law self-defense member Paul in Florida asks, is Steve Gosney in private practice? He is not. Steve is a public defender down in Florida. So very much not in private practice. He's been in private practice. I think he did real estate law, some flavor of real estate law for a few years. Then he was a prosecutor for 6 or 7 years, and then he became a public defender for the last, I think, 12 years or so. Very smart guy, Steve, as all of you can tell who's seen him on the show. And a really nice guy, genuine friend. Let's see. See if there's any, I don't know, this is the part I hate, because I don't have the audience of a Rakita Law to keep peppering in super chats to keep the conversation going for 3 hours while the court's off camera.
Oh yeah, I totally have that experience as well.
It's that's why I took a break over lunch today. But at least then I knew what time the court was coming back into session. So someone in the chat, YouTube chat says, Ashton says, Branca talked about it. Both were privileged for self-defense use, assuming she didn't know was a cop. Yeah, I think there's a credible self-defense narrative for both the victim here and for the police officer. Yeah. If the victim had shot the police officer, I presume, folks, there's no reason to indicate she would deliberately shoot a police officer if she knew it was a police officer. That 2:30 in the morning, flashlights outside, not a really safe neighborhood. She would have assumed it was a prowler, prospective home invader or burglar, and shot him. And I think she would have had a very viable self-defense narrative, especially given the context that she's a 28-year-old woman alone, but for the 8-year-old she's babysitting. I mean, that's a very vulnerable
Yep.
situation
yeah.
to be in.
And I think for her too, though, she wanted to make, and I think she really wanted to make sure what she was aiming at. That's why she didn't just fire when she probably could have. And it's just that, just making sure, is this a person I want to shoot, is probably what kind of did it in for her.
I don't think she could see. I mean, that flashlight that officer had, that streamlight flashlight, is so bright. I mean, I've had them put on me, and it's like a white wall in front of you. I mean, you can't see anything at all. Resist Impulse, $5 super chat says, long time process digital and DNA evidence, heard of defense teams that specialize in speedy trial rights to force state to trial unprepared and stressed.
That can be done. That's a dangerous gamble.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind, folks, that most defendants are criminals. So they don't necessarily want a speedy trial, especially if they're out on bond. I mean, there's a good prospect when they go to trial, they get convicted, and then they're going to prison. So a delay is good for them. I mean, we all remember the Florida popcorn movie theater case, right? With Curtis Reeves, where someone threw popcorn at him, and then he ended up shooting that guy. There was I forget now, like a 7 or 8 year delay between the shooting event and the trial itself. And some of that was COVID, but not all of that was COVID. And I was beginning to wonder, because Curtis Reeves, the defendant there, was a retired cop. He'd been a SWAT officer. I think he retired as a captain, and he was old when the shooting happened and not in great health. If there was, at least among some parties involved, an intentional delay, figuring, hey, if we can wait long enough, he'll die, and then we don't have to try him. Of course, ultimately, he was tried and he was acquitted in that trial. Phil Moore, $5 super chat, writes, imagine going to prison during Christmas. What a goofball. Well, it's not really up to him. I am very happy, though.
I think he means the guy who started mouthing off to the court.
Oh, yeah. And that's just stupid all around.
Yes.
Man, if I was out on bond, you wouldn't find me anywhere near a court. I'm not going near a judge. I mean, that's like a landmine.
Yeah. Yes.
That's crazy. I will say I was very pleased when I heard that. So I'm planning to cover this Courtney Clenny trial. This is the OnlyFans model who killed her boyfriend. Another girl who killed a man with a single knife punch to the chest with a little tiny knife. Basically the same thing. She hit an artery. Courtney Clenny hit an artery coming off the aorta as opposed to the aorta itself, but the same result, just a little bit slower. So she's been charged with, I guess it's murder, second-degree murder in Florida, and is claiming self-defense. So I'll be covering that trial, and it was scheduled for December 19th, which is crazy. Well, how the hell, it's going to be a high-profile, multi-week trial. So you're going to have a break over Christmas.
The week before Christmas. Oh.
So, but thank God they've delayed it. So they just had last month they had a lengthy series of pre-trial release hearings, and they denied her bond, and they set the next status update meeting for the trial to the first week of February. So it's definitely not happening before February. Thank God for that, because I would have been.
That judge is crazy.
I was trying to tell my wife I might have to miss Christmas covering this stupid trial.
Yeah. Wow.
But thank God they put it off. Yeah. Let's see. Come on, super chat. I tell you, man, this YouTube super chat function is not great. Sometimes it doesn't want to refresh. Another Kevin Dollars, $10 super chat. Maybe don't complain about super chats. Just some advice. All right, Kevin, I'll take that under advisement. I will take that under advisement. Too bad you're not in the U.S. You could have been a platinum member with all your super chats today. But I do appreciate it. My wife appreciates it. Maybe a little extra Christmas gift for the wife from today's super chats. You guys were very generous today. Hey, Sean, as long as people, the population of viewers changes all the time, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure,
what you do.
Yeah, so I run a channel, Potentially Criminal, here on YouTube. You can find it that way. I am a practicing attorney. I do primarily defense-related work, so I like to talk about that, defense-related topics, other things that are going on in the news. I do a weekly show every Thursday at 9:30, and then videos throughout the week. If there's a trial going on and I'm able to stream it, definitely going to be doing that. The big one coming up for me is going to be Sarah Boone. That's at the end of January. She's the lady who left her boyfriend in the suitcase to suffocate, and it's a question of whether that was murder or what actually happened there.
She put her boyfriend in a suitcase?
Well, he got drunk and he was a smaller guy, so he got into the suitcase and it looks like he zipped it up, and then he couldn't get out, and then he suffered positional asphyxiation, and because she was drunk, he had allegedly abused her, and she's filming him saying please let me out, and you can see like the poking on in the bag, and she says, no, this is what you get for abusing me, and then she goes upstairs and passes out. He dies. She then opens up, tries to get him out, tries to revive him. She calls 911, but she puts him back in the suitcase. There's a bunch of weird stuff with it. So yeah, it's
Lord.
it's going to be interesting. But
So
yeah, guys,
Ohio's-
I'm on Rumble, Locals. Yeah, I'm everywhere.
Ohio's kind of interesting from a self-defense law perspective because self-defense law doesn't change very often in the states, folks. It's very rare. It's a very stable area of the law. But Ohio, just in the last couple of years, has had two big changes. One is it became Ohio was the last state in the country that put the burden of self-defense on the defendant to prove self-defense by a preponderance of the evidence. And the other 49 states, the prosecution, once the defense has met their burden of production on self-defense, the burden shifts and the state has to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Ohio changed that standard just a couple of years ago. And then a little bit later, they became a stand your ground state. In fact, what I would call a hard stand your ground state. But I remember I was at dinner with the Ohio prosecutor when they did the burden change, and he was losing his mind. He was like, well, this is crazy. We'll never get a conviction again anytime someone claims self-defense. I'm like, dude, the other 49 states do it this way, right? And they get convictions just fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And getting rid of the duty to retreat was very, very good. I'm so glad that happened as well. So that was the biggest thing.
I did a consult on a case out of Ohio before they were stand your ground. And it was a dispute between a homeowner and a garage door repairman. So the garage door had broken. He called the repairman, and somehow they got into some kind of verbal confrontation with each other. And the homeowner went to his car in the garage and got a gun out of the car, a pistol out of the car. So he was afraid he might have to defend himself. And under the law at that time, because the repairman had been invited into the home, he was an invited guest, and the homeowner, Castle Doctrine would not have applied because he was an invited guest in the home. So the homeowner would have had a duty to retreat if possible, and he had a path of retreat. Now, he didn't shoot the repairman, but the repairman would eventually call the police and complain, and the homeowner got charged with aggravated assault with a firearm. But what happened there, so we got those charges dismissed, because what happened is, although the repairman had been invited during the argument, the repairman started pacing back and forth, and he actually paced out of the garage and then back into the garage, at which point he's no longer an invited guest.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time he came in, he was invited, but the second time the homeowner had already told him to leave. He stepped off out of the structure and then stepped back into the structure. And we knew this because we caught it on the home security cameras. So that changed the whole thing. So suddenly the homeowner didn't have a legal duty to retreat anymore because now the guy was an intruder in his home.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to say that wasn't because the homeowner did anything particularly right. It was because he got lucky and the aggressor accidentally did something wrong. That changed the whole legal argument.
It's those little things, and
frankly, the lead counsel didn't pick it up.
No, and the other thing is, though, guys, people, as far as getting in these types of encounters, it's one thing to say, "Oh, I'm not going to mess up." It's like, how sure are you that you're not going to do something wrong? I mean, people flying the space shuttle, could have an oopsie poopsie. You doing this, you're not gonna. It's not gonna be planned. It's gonna happen. You're not gonna be ready for it. How do you know you're gonna be perfect in that? So that's why those times where it's just avoid it, because the idea that you're gonna perform flawlessly, you won't. You're going to screw up. Something happens. Every little thing you do will get picked on and picked apart. So
we all screw up all the time, just normally. Hey, Ian.
Hey.
Hi, Ian.
And Danny, if you're, I can't remember now. Did I send Danny? I might not have sent her a link for the afternoon. Let me take care of that, Danny, in case you want to join us. And I did find the little switch in StreamYard that makes it make a pinging sound when people come in. So I'm less likely to forget people in the future.
Yeah,
So.
I've had that problem before too.
I've got to find that one. So
it's in the settings.
Okay. I know I followed Danny. Danny, I followed you on, but I can't message you. So I don't think you followed me back. So I followed you on Twitter, but it looks like you haven't followed me back because I can't message you. So if you do that, I'll be happy to send you the guest link if you'd like to join us. But yeah, so I spent many years shooting pistols competitively at a very high level. I shot all over the country, the U.S. At a master class level, which at the time was the highest competitive level. And so I was pretty experienced and I was pretty good. But I made mistakes every match I went to. I make mistakes. There's no perfect performance. And that's under just enjoying myself. Now, imagine having to do something similar, run with a gun, do reloads, go from cover to cover, effectively shoot targets quickly and accurately when someone's actually trying to kill you. It's a completely different experience, folks. It changes everything.
Even just like the competitive shooting is a massively different experience from like just sitting there and shooting targets at a range without moving.
Right.
The amount, I mean, when I started doing 3-gun, I found, things like I don't know how to reload a gun. This had never been a problem before, but you go and try to reload it under that time pressure and everything goes wrong. It's hugely different. And that's not with gunfire. Like that's the two-way range is a whole different world.
And it's funny. It's like the cliche about war, right? So nothing's very complicated, but the simplest things are extremely complicated. Or what's the phrase? Everything's very simple, but what is that? What is that quote?
I'm trying to
in
think.
War, everything is simple. Clausewitz. Everything in war is very simple, but the simplest thing is difficult.
Yes.
That's what it's like in a run and gun sport, like 3-gun or IDPA or USPCA or steel is a little different because you're not doing reloads really there. But things you practice at home, like doing a quick magazine change on a handgun, suddenly gets really complicated when it's under time pressure and other people are watching and you don't want to embarrass yourself. Even though the actual technical aspects are simple, when you're in your basement dry firing and practicing, you never have any trouble. All you have to do to shoot a gun in the first place is line up the sights and depress the trigger without messing up the sight alignment, and you'll hit the target every time. But we miss, despite it being that straightforward, we still miss.
Oh, I mean, I've got videos like watching, when I did 3-gun with a GoPro, and then you go back and you're just like, how am I missing this target that's right up close? And it's, oh, right, it's because I just ran 50 feet hauling a heavy object and my arms are noodles. All of these things you just don't expect. And I think it's dangerous with the jury trials because they've never done these things. They don't understand it. They've watched movies where everybody is this perfect shot all the time. And I always worry about that.
Right. And then, of course, we know from real life shootings, police shootings, at least here in the U.S., they miss at least a third of the time, often 2/3 of the time of the rounds they fire, they miss, often at very close distances.
I've seen numerous files where the police have opened up on somebody and like mag dumped and hit nothing from distances that are real short. Somebody sent me just for a second opinion. They were trying to figure out what happened with the police officer. And they'd fired a line of shots that basically started at the officer's foot and ended somewhere. And basically they just panicked, were drawing their gun and shooting as they went. And by the time they brought it up to where, the person was, there was just no accuracy at all. I'm sure that officer never did that on the range.
Yeah, it's everything becomes very difficult under stress. Which is why, by the way, I originally started competitive shooting with a handgun. In part was because I had gotten my concealed carry permit as a young man, as an adult, and I had done a lot of competitive shooting as a kid, but it was all small bore rifle, very standard shooting positions, plenty of time to shoot. It was precision was very important, but time, I mean, there were some time constraints, but they were very loose. And now I was walking around in public with a concealed pistol on my person. I thought, you know what, I better learn how to shoot this at a higher level than just standing there in a square range. And competitive shooting, action shooting, USPCA, IDPA, 3-gun is fantastic for that. You'll never see better gun handling, than you see out of a practitioner of one of those active shooting. You can tell immediately when they pick up a gun and handle it that they're extremely familiar and safe with that gun.
Yeah, well, just the things as well, when you've got, you've got things like shoot and no shoot targets as well in a lot of these disciplines. And that's a skill that you often don't see with police officers even, is just things like, listen, if I take a shot at this target, am I also going to hit that no shoot that's beyond it, which gets to be important if you're thinking about somebody, in any sort of real world scenario. You have to know your target and what's beyond it. You don't want to take a shot if, for instance, there's an innocent standing behind them that might get, that needs to factor into your consideration. So all of these things are important.
Yeah, we just had a shooting here in Denver, a nightclub, outside a nightclub shooting where the police were called, uniformed cops were called from around the corner because somebody was waving a gun around, and 6 or 7 or 8 uniformed cops swarm in. The guy shows his gun and they all start shooting at him. And a bunch of bystanders are shot because it was a very crowded sidewalk.
Yeah. We had one here, similar thing. Police take a shot at a guy and it enters into an apartment building and kills somebody who's just like completely unaware. They just were standing there minding their own business, and suddenly that's it.
Wrong place at the wrong time. Yep.
Yep. Absolute tragedy.
Hey, Danny, I sent you the guest link on Twitter if you want to join us, if you're still around.
Did you answer the super chat about the dumpster guys yet?
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
I'm definitely planning on covering that trial. I don't know when it's scheduled. They keep changing the date.
Yeah. January 23rd.
I saw that.
Take your swing.
Take your swing, right? Yeah, I saw the super chat mentioned January 23rd. I looked at my calendar. I don't have it listed there. So I've added it on the 23rd with a question mark, and I'll follow up. But whenever it happens, assuming I'm not traveling or something, I'll be covering it. That'll be high on the list. That's an interesting case.
It's interesting, but I know at the end of the day, if you were to ask those two goofballs what they like right now, I'm betting they thought go back to their little hovel and drink their Mountain Dew and eat their Cheetos. They would so much be rather doing that than dusting their asshole of a neighbor. Because years of every time you get a free second thinking, oh my God, I might go to prison forever.
Right.
That would drive you insane.
Yeah. Most of the cases I work on, when
over a dumpster,
that person's charged with a felony. They're typically most of my cases are aggravated assault with a deadly weapon cases, because they're serious enough. The prison time is long enough that people are willing to pay for a legal consult from someone like me, and they're looking at 20 years in prison. And when I look at the facts of that case, I see a lot of exits off that interstate to discharging that gun that they could have taken, and for whatever reason they chose not to. Their ego got spun up, or they panicked, but if they'd been thinking more rationally, they would have said, you know what, this isn't worth going to the gun over, and they never would have found themselves facing that legal jeopardy. But it pays to think these things through ahead of time, folks.
Yeah, well, there's a big thing in sports and so forth about the stuff you mentally rehearse is how you're going to do it in the time. That's why we have things like fire drills, right? So that you know to go to the exits instead of just sitting there going, oh my God, or people hide in closets from fires and stuff like that. Fire knows how to get into the closet. But all of the, you see people who get into these like defensive shootings over I shot the guy because he was trying to take my quad. It's like, well, the quad costs less than the lawyer. You can buy a whole raft of quads so people are like, what would you do if somebody was taking your TV? I'm like, cool. Good stuff. I'm sitting in a room, in sort of a defensive thing that if you're coming after me, then we've got an issue. But if you're taking the stuff, I'm not really so keen on, on risking that one.
Yeah. If you're not coming towards my bedroom,
And you could do everything actually completely correct, legally correct,
Yeah.
and still end up convicted and spending the rest of your life in prison. So I always tell people, think about it this way. What are you willing to spend the rest of your life in prison over? Because that's the only thing you should be getting into a gunfight over, because that could be the outcome. Well, for the other outcome is you could die in the fight, right?
Yes.
So there's a greater than zero risk of dying in the fight. That's bad. And a greater than zero risk of going to prison for the rest of your life. Even if you do everything right, you run those risks. So what's worth those risks? There are some things, but there's not a lot of things.
Yeah. And I say this, and I've mentioned this to people before. When you're in a trial and the prosecutor turns around and points at you and says, that's the bad man. That's the bad guy who did all this harm and hurt in front of a jury. I've dealt with guys who are the toughest gangsters. And even when you're sitting next to them, you know it's not you. The first time it ever happened to me when I was doing a trial by myself, I was like, it was an awkward feeling. But even the toughest gangsters out there, it's they recoil a little bit too. It's not, everybody likes to say they'd rather be tried by 12 till you're actually sitting there being tried by 12.
Right. Do you know the 12?
Yeah.
Can I introduce you to the 12?
Yeah.
So here's a $5 super chat from Mark Baumer. Debating getting a concealed carry in Chicago. Is it worth it to carry in Illinois versus less than lethal options like pepper spray? I don't trust a jury in Chicago. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I don't do gun law, so I can't answer any questions like that. If you decide to go that way, I could recommend an excellent Chicago area self-defense instructor. The company is Carry Trainer, CARRY Trainer, TRAINER.com, carrytrainer.com. Mickey Shooks is the head boss there. He does a fantastic job. I've taught at his tactical conferences. A gun and pepper spray are two very different options for two very different problems. The pepper spray, at least in the U.S., if you look at Department of Justice crime statistics, you're 5 times more likely to be facing a non-deadly force threat than you are a deadly force threat. And you can't go to the gun over a non-deadly force threat. You need a non-deadly force response to a non-deadly force threat. I like pepper spray for that. I carry pepper spray every day. I got it in my pocket right now. A gun is very, very rarely the answer to the problem. Unfortunately, when it is the answer, it's generally the only answer, which is why I also carry a gun. But I've carried a gun every day my whole life. I've never come close to having to need it, in part because I'm so cautious about putting myself in situations where it might be necessary to use that gun. I don't tell other people that they should or shouldn't carry a gun for personal protection. I think it's a very individual decision that has to be made. I carry a gun every day. I have for 38 years. But that doesn't mean it's right for everybody. In fact, for some people, it's definitely not right. But I don't know you, Mark, so I wouldn't be able to actually make an informed decision. I would encourage you to make an informed decision by first informing yourself, by getting adequate training and instruction, and maybe pick up a free copy of the Law of Self-Defense Principles. Look at the reviews on Amazon, 5-star rated on Amazon, folks, 1,200 plus reviews. But don't buy it there. They'll charge you $25 for the book plus shipping and handling. I'll give you the book, real book. I'll give you the book for free. Just cover the cost of shipping it to you at lawofselfdefense.com/free book. Easy enough to remember. And gentlemen, Law and Crime has killed the feed.
Oh.
So that might be it for today.
Oh, geez.
It is 4:20 there. And I don't know what's happened because they didn't tell us, but maybe that the jury's just said we're not going to have a decision today.
The process is the punishment, I guess.
Yep. So I'm going to plan to start up a live stream again in the morning. The court usually starts about 8:30. So I'll plan for a live stream tomorrow, 8:30. I'll send all you guys invites if you'd like to join as
really?
your time and interest allows. Oh, no. What am I saying? Today's Friday. I completely lost track of time.
Well,
no, I don't think
do.
I doubt they'll do Saturday. Oh, God, would they take the whole weekend off in the middle of the sentencing stage?
Oh, that's brutal.
I don't know. Well, anyway, I'll keep my eyes on the news and see if the media has anything to report. And if you're on my email list, I'll send an email. I'll put follow me on Twitter. I'll put something on Twitter about what the plans are. But if I have the opportunity, I'll plan to cover the rest of the sentencing. God willing, it's not going to be another full day like today was.
Yeah.
And other than that, Ian, why don't you tell people where people can find you?
I am at Runkle of the Bailey on YouTube. Right now, I'm doing a lot of commentary on the Canadian firearm bans that they're trying to push through, which is tragic. I mean, I mentioned that I enjoy 3-gun. They're going to make that impossible. You just can't do 3-gun with. I mean, they're banning every gun that you'd use for that. So, yeah, Runkle of the Bailey at youtube.com.
I'm seeing in the chat that the local news media is reporting they're going to start up on Monday at 9 a.m. So that's what I'll plan to do, folks. That's our default plan. Monday, 9 a.m. I'll set up another stream. I'll invite the usual crowd, and we'll see who can attend as their time and interest allows. And I guess that's all I have for today, folks. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I will bid you adieu, and look for a Twitter DM from me with the guest link to Monday's show.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right, take care, guys.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
And for everybody else, as I close out, just a reminder, if you carry a gun so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law so you're hard to convict. Until next time, I remain. Next time being Monday at 9 a.m., unless I'll probably do a show this weekend on something else. But until next time, whenever that may be, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.